me call this meeting to order. First off, let me welcome everybody here this afternoon. We have two bills on the calendar. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I want to welcome everybody here. We have two bills on the calendar today at the House Public Safety Homeland Security meeting. First bill we're going to hear is going to probably be the shorter bill. We're going to do this special for Representative Strickland because he might be here until it gets dark if we don't. If you would come forward and present your bill.
Just the opening act to a bigger show, so I won't take too much of y'all's time. Bring to the committee House Bill 518, which deals with public safety at school bus stops. And currently under the code, there are 46163, which I was surprised when I first started researching this. The only time that a vehicle is actually supposed to stop when approaching a bus is when that bus has any color lights, whether it's amber or red, on, and that bus is actually stopped. And we had a child last April in 2012 in Henry County that was killed when he missed his bus stop. And he was running out actually chasing after the bus. The bus was turned back around. There's different stories about the facts, but the fact is he missed his stop, bus driver moved on, another car came up and actually hit the child. What this bill would do is actually require drivers within 200 feet of any stop to put their amber or yellow lights on. And then once they stop, of course, red lights come on like always. And once they leave a stop, they once again activate their yellow lights, and they stay on 200 feet after a stop as well to deal with kids that may miss a stop. Maybe there are kids out there waiting with their friend to get on a bus. And also, of course, when kids get off a bus, they're running around different places as well. It would alert drivers going both ways that a stop has occurred or may have occurred if you come over a hill and maybe a bus is pulling away and actually slow down as much as you might would if you saw yellow lights. And I've talked to different people within the bus driving community, and it seems like this is already the internal policy with the exception of the yellow lights after a stop. The 200 feet actually came from my local bus barn back in Henry County. So I'll be happy to take any questions y'all have on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question. Currently, divided highways, oncoming traffic does not stop. Is your intention to change that?
That is not my intention. We don't actually change the part of the code that deals with divided highways. We would simply change the rules as far as when the lights come on by a bus. And I don't believe the intention of this bill. The way it's written still, you have to be approaching a bus or you have to be riding behind a bus. We don't change the definition of what it's like to approach or ride behind a bus, though.
Because it does sound like if you're overtaking the school bus, even from the same direction, it's not real clear to me. It sounded like it could affect those. So that was a concern for me.
And if you want to offer some language where we could clear that up to make sure, but it's not my intention to change the current policy as far as when someone stops for a bus on a divided highway.
Online 12 is where I was referring to, because it indicates actually from either direction.
That's current law.
Okay. So. Okay, as long as it's covered somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Neal, Chairman Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Strickland. As I was sitting here listening to you, and I know we've talked a little bit about this prior, but as I was sitting here listening to you, here's what came to my mind is we're looking at a bus that has already stopped and is now beginning to proceed. If I'm understanding what you're talking about, as the bus begins to proceed, the driver reactivates those amber lights again?
That's correct.
So the oncoming traffic that has stopped has to continue to sit there until the driver turns those lights off?
That's correct.
And when you turn the lights off, you turn them off by actually activating the red lights initially and then turning them back off. There's not a step, I don't think, on these buses that goes from amber to off. It goes from amber to red lights to off. And a couple concerns that just came to me as you were talking about this. One is you've got people in oncoming traffic that if they're sitting there and the driver activates and starts to move, they have to continue to sit there until the driver's beyond them. So how difficult is it for them to see when the lights are deactivated? And for traffic that's coming and sees those lights, when you go back through the progression to red light again before going off, you're going to have people coming that think that you're coming up on a stop and they're preparing to stop, and then you turn the lights off, and that might create some confusion from those oncoming traffic as well.
And I understand. I appreciate the question. This would change the way people approach bus stops. When a bus pulls away, you would no longer follow that bus along behind them. You have to sit until you no longer see those yellow lights anymore. Where the bus goes over a hill or 200 feet in front of you, actually turn those bus lights off. This would change the way people approach bus stops altogether. When you're approaching a bus, and if you come up a hill and a bus is coming over the hill with the yellow lights on, you still would have to pull to the side and stop. Of course, that bus, they're going away from stop, will be actually going past you. Once they pass you, you can move on at that point. But, I mean, it's overly cautious. Of course, when a child is killed at a bus stop, typically it's the child's fault. But kids don't always know better, and this will actually put more precautions out there and be overly cautious and force people to stop it both ways before and after a stop. So maybe it's a little bit of overkill, but I think it could possibly avoid things happening like that happened last year in my county. And as far as the way the lights are activated, that was one reason I ran this by my local bus barn back home. They didn't see any issue with that, but I know in my experience riding a bus, it wasn't that long ago I was riding a bus, and I know there were times where a bus would plan to stop and then not put the red lights on and move on. So I'm not sure how that works. You know a lot more about that than I do. But obviously, I would work with, I'm not sure if it'd be the DOT, who would be that actually regulates those buses. We'd make sure this could work, though, for the buses without actually having to flash red lights on.
Yeah, it's been 9 years since I drove a school bus, but at the time I drove a bus, you had to activate the red lights and then deactivate. There was not a progression that went from amber to off. You had to activate the red lights first.
Do you recall if it was a quick button push or if it's more involved than that in your experience?
You flip the switch to activate the red lights, and then you have to flip it again to turn them off.
Okay.
My concern, of course, is the confusion that may come to drivers when they see. Sometimes they see a bus that goes from yellow to red because you're picking up students, and sometimes it goes from yellow to red and then they're off again, and that concerns me about confusion among drivers.
And I understand that, but I think the confusion would require them to pull over, and the worst thing that would happen is they'd stop for a second, which is what I'm trying to accomplish with the bill. But I do understand it would change the way, like I said, we approach buses on the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Strickland, as I was reading this, I just have one friendly question. Should we put a punishment, or should a punishment be included in the bill for violation?
And that crossed my mind as well, and I'll refer to legal counsel on is it already in place? I thought it was. I had the same question last night. I was looking at this again before I came up here today, and I shouldn't have asked it before if that was already in place.
The same penalties that currently exist would apply to this situation.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be sure I wrap my brain around this. So essentially, if I pull up, they put the little arm out, say stop, my vehicle stops right there, correct? And then if this bill passes, I have to wait till the bus passes me and goes essentially 96 yards down the road before I can move?
Technically, until it passes you, because you wouldn't actually be approaching the bus with yellow lights anymore.
Okay.
So once the bus pulls away, if you're right there, my understanding, if you're right there at a stop, this actually wouldn't change what you're doing because the bus is going to pull away from you. It's those cars that are coming on to the bus, that are approaching the bus, that would also pull over and slow down, hopefully giving more time for kids to get out of the road.
If I could ask one more question, I was noticing on line 22, until the bus resumes motion, and the amber lights are no longer activated or flashing. And then at line 18, they would flash the lights, essentially not less than 200 feet from both sides of the designated bus stop. So they would continue 200 feet
That's
down the
correct.
road. So I could not move until they're essentially 96 yards past me. Correct? So I'm having to look in my rearview mirror to be sure that the bus is.
I guess technically you're right. My intention was if
I'm
the
not
bus is
banging on you, I'm
past
just trying to
But I think
figure this
technically
out.
you are correct. You put it that way. I think you're right. Which I guess at the end of the day, the person I should care the most about is the person right there at the kids anyway. They're getting off the bus. So technically, I guess they have to look back in the rearview mirror and make sure the bus has gone on, turn those lights off. So yes.
Was there any thought given to a shorter distance for active? I like the idea of activating coming in. It's just the leaving portion that kind of
Yeah, the
bothered me.
200 feet came from, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's a state policy or if it's just a Henry County policy, but that's their policy as far as approaching a stop. I didn't do a different amount of feet leaving, but the 200 feet actually came from what current policy is. That's not codified. But I understand it's different leaving a stop, so we could, possibly shorten that. But that's where that came from. That way it's consistent for bus drivers.
Thank you, Representative.
Any other questions from the committee? If I might ask, Representative, did you have a chance to talk to the State Patrol after this accident?
I personally did not.
I'm going to use the prerogative of the chair on this, since there seems to be a little bit of problems that may be with this type of a sight distance. I want to hold this bill in the bosom of the committee right now, and I want to recommend that. See which one of our troopers.
I might find a
are
couple
over
in the room. I don't know.
Captain? Would you get with the captain and talk to some? They have some accident experts over there that might could lend a little bit more help before we start passing this, and then maybe we can even get someone up here from the School Bus Drivers Association, somebody that deals with this, to see if we can perfect some language.
That sounds great.
And thank you so much.
All right,
for the
thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now have in front of us House Bill 512. Now, if I might go ahead and say a few things on this bill. We have quite a few folks now. As anyone wishes to be heard that has not signed up. As usual, as is the mode of this committee, we like for everybody to be able to be heard if they wish to address this bill. And if they want to, I'll put this back down, or if you want to just let them sign up. If there's anyone here today that if you think you're in children or youth, you're in the wrong committee. This is the Public Safety Committee, and we're hearing House Bill 512. Would author Representative Jaspers come forward, sir?
Ready, Chairman Powell?
Ready.
Ready to roll? Okay. I'll take a big, deep breath. And as all of us look around the room, you can imagine why I am. But I thank you and the members of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee for listening to my bill today. This committee that I'm in front of has worked especially hard during this session with a number of controversial bills. When I was thinking about this, I'd imagine you've won the most email and phone call award of the session, by far. Thank you for being on the front line to ensure that our federal and state constitution are held tight and observed. But the Second Amendment is important to everybody that's in here today. My grandfather was an immigrant from Holland. He had a copy of the Constitution on his coffee table. The Bill of Rights were out there beside it. And he would tell me many times that those two documents, among all the other things he read, were what made our country great. And the Second Amendment was important to him, as being from Europe, an unarmed country at the time. That and property rights was what separated us from all other countries, he said many times. During the month that I've been working on this bill, I've thought about him often. And it's with great sense of pride I'm here to talk with you today about House Bill 512. I want to especially thank a couple of people before we get started into it. Chairman John Meadows from Calhoun, whose steady hand and wise counsel has helped me a lot. Thank you to Chairman Powell and the many members who have given me advice and helped me perfect this bill to where we're at today. Of course, I can't leave out our legislative counsel, Jill Travis for her patience, and Bill Riley for the Speaker's office for helping me so much. Okay, I named House Bill 512 the Safe Carry Protection Act because it's designed to keep Georgians safe, improve Georgians with the license, the ability to carry in more places, and protect themselves. This bill is for our residents who've gone through the process of fingerprinting, background check, mental health screen to obtain the Georgia weapons license. For those who take on this very serious responsibility of carrying a weapon, it will allow them to carry more places in our state. The reason we are working hard on this, or I am, is because of the request of law-abiding citizens. Since my first political speech, when I sat between now Governor Deal and Speaker Ralston, the first one I ever gave, the people at that meeting, this is what they asked. And they asked me, what's our response and what are we going to do about it? Well, 512's our response. If you look at your bill, it's LC 5596. Make sure we all on the same one. It's a sub. And also, Mr. Chairman, I have Ed Stone who'll be answering any questions of the legal nature that I have. It's right over there to make sure, because I'm not an attorney. Okay, we'll start off we'll just go through section by section as quickly as I can, very quickly. In section 1.2, you're going to see the word private used many times, and also the ability not only to forbid, where we added the lines to exclude or eject a person. You know, private property and its use is a powerful force in our country and the basis of our capitalistic economic system. You know, in line 14, the reference there is to the criminal trespass law. Without consent, one remains on the land of another. And you'll also see it uses private property. You control it as private property. Let's go to section 1.3. I'm sorry this is 17 pages long, so I'll try to move as quick as I can. Okay, in this section, it's a carrying a weapon in unauthorized locations. And then first, it really defines what those are. Starting in line 39, those are definitions. Line 60 are areas where it doesn't apply, where it does not apply. If you look on line 68, we're removing places of worship. Okay, so that's one, churches, or whatever you want to call it, synagogues. We hopefully will take and get us out of the business of regulating what goes on inside of a church, because they are by definition private property. I can go into it if you'd like for me to in the questioning about why we think that, but it really decriminalizes it, and I think it's a good thing for us to move on. I think the main thing I learned from my daughter when talking about this was, I think her simple statement of common sense that hopefully she learned in the mountains is, what business does the state of Georgia have in the church? And I appreciate her for looking at it like that. On line 74, we're going to look at removing bars. You know, current law does not criminalize carrying in a restaurant that serves alcohol, but does criminalize carrying in a bar. It's not always apparent to the patron of an establishment whether the establishment is a restaurant or a bar. Many restaurants have the words bar, tub, or tavern in their name, but they nevertheless are not bars. When the legislature decriminalized carrying firearms in restaurants that serve alcohol in 2008, and then decriminalizing drinking and carrying in such establishments in 2010, critics predicted dire consequences, the OK Corral and such. And of course, those have not come to pass. I want to emphasize, people with licenses continue to be our most law-abiding citizens. And that's why we'd like to remove that. There are 25 states that now allow bar carry, and we'd like to be one of them. Okay. And remember, just as we're going through, we can carry with a license everywhere not listed in this part of the code. Look on line 87. This is just a restatement of the law thing, as you'll see throughout there. I've learned a great deal from legal counsel about the law and how to read it, and it's been good for me. On line 105, we're talking about government buildings. And from what I understand, Chairman Powell, you have a restatement of that. Do you want to read it, or
You go ahead and
I'll just
present
keep
the
on
bill,
going?
and I'll go through after testimony, and we'll go through a list
Okay.
changes.
Okay. Currently, 35 states are permitted to carry in government buildings. It's one of those things that's vague, and I'll keep it short. It's one of that we'd like to see folks be able to carry in government buildings. We have a pretty good preventer, we think, that Chairman Powell will talk about. And these are public buildings, and we do recognize there are secure things that go in them. We're not touching courthouses, jails, or any of that stuff. Just government buildings that don't have security. Allow our folks, like I say again, who are licensed carriers, are most law-abiding citizens, to enter and exit those places freely. We look at section 1.4. This is where we're going to talk about school safety zones. It's probably the most difficult part of the bill that we worked on, is school safety zones. I think we had a very open conversation with all parties that were involved in it, and I'll try to explain to you how we did this. What we did in the bill is we separated the school safety zone into two parts, kindergarten, what we would call kindergarten through 12th grade in common language. Of course, you'll see on line 124 how they divide it into A and B. B being the public, private, technical colleges, vocational schools, college, universities, and other institutions of post-secondary. That's where we would like to allow campus, what we call campus carry, in B. And then as you look through the next 3 pages, there are lots of definitions, because when we touched school zones, school safety zones, we really had to work on making sure that we did it uniformly, that we didn't do anything that would harm what we've done in our K-12 safety zones, and didn't let any breaks into that. It took quite a bit of writing and careful consideration to make sure we did that. And you say, why do you want it, Rick? And that's a good question. I have a daughter who goes to Georgia State, as many folks in here do, and there is an epidemic of violence, unfortunately, not only in our campuses, but around them. And I think that's where we talk about mostly, is our students moving from off-campus housing into the universities and colleges and back and forth at all times of the night and day. These students also are non-traditional. Many of them are. They're a different age group than maybe we tend to think, than just the college fraternity guy that some people try to scare us with. I think our campus security teams have made it their priority to protect our students from being easy prey, and I thank them for that. But people who have licenses, and that's our folks, like we've said repeatedly, who are most law-abiding citizens, who are fingerprinted, go through the background checks, and follow the rules, should be allowed to carry in these areas. I'd like to draw your attention to line 217. And this is where we accomplish that. You've noticed we've separated, our different levels of education. And in section 19, any license holder, when he or she is in any real property, and you can read it, and look down through there, the exception shall not apply to such property or buildings used for athletic sporting events or student housing, including those fraternities and sororities. So I think when we looked at this, we used common sense, that those are two places that of high emotion, that we didn't need to have those in there, and try to be wise. Critics, of course, are going to warn that college students shouldn't have firearms, but they already ignore that alcohol is not supposed to be on campuses. But students, they all purchase it. But I think one of the things I thought about many times doing this is this 21-year-old and above group, like we said, are rule followers. And those folks who do take the responsibility of taking a weapon, putting it in their thumb, on their pocket or wherever they do, take on a great responsibility. And believe it or not, 19 of our local states, or states in the United States, do permit licensees to carry on campus, including our neighbor Alabama. And we don't hear of the scare tactics that you might hear. One interesting case I want to bring out is in Virginia. The Commonwealth of Virginia does not ban guns on campuses, but individual schools can and do so. Virginia Tech was one of those that chose to ban guns, and it was the site of the well-known mass shooting. Appalachian Law School does not ban guns, and then when a would-be mass shooter began a rampage there, 2 armed students quickly subdued him. preventing a Virginia Tech-like tragedy. I think we owe it to our students and staffs of our post-secondary colleges the ability to protect themselves in our dangerous world. Okay. Jumping down to section 1.5. I want to get a drink of water. Ooh. We had a number of questions asking about on line 268 about convicted. Yes, convicted in Georgia does mean NOLO does mean guilty, but as these convictions are put on people's records, it does prevent them from getting licensed in other states. And so we wanted just to clean that up. I'll ask in a few minutes. I'll have Ed Stone just try to help me explain that just a little bit. Okay, got to keep straight too. Okay, we'll turn the page real quickly, and jump on down to 306. Just want to make sure everybody understands in the committee that the probate judge in the issuance of licenses is all powerful, and has a great responsibility, and I've learned to appreciate that. It's just one of those things when you work on a bill, you certainly learn a bunch, and I have learned about how an incredibly important job the probate judge does. And what we've done on the mental health side of this thing is try to empower the probate judge by making sure he can get reportable information that he can use, and then making people sign waivers or accesses to their mental information so he can make a good decision. He or she can make a very accurate determination. And that's what we did throughout this part. I think we've done it. As we've talked to people, they feel that it's pretty strong considering the reporting standards that we have today. And I feel good about what we've done there. So keep moving, and I'll answer questions when we get to it in a few minutes. We jump next to and one thing also with the probate judges, we really wanted to put a 30-day time limit on the people that report back to them so that they can make a timely decision. I think everyone wants to do that. We jump to line 339. We're talking about fingerprinting real quick. We'd like to remove the fingerprint requirement for temporary renewals and renewals of licenses. If you haven't seen a current weapons carry license, this is my wife's. It's very pretty, just like our driver's license now. It's very accurate, very full of information, and not easily redone, whereas the one I have from 2013, well, no, that's when it's due. I don't know, I've had it 5 years. I don't read good upside down, but I've had it a few years now, and you see the difference that we have made in making a better license that is more accurate. But most importantly here, this is just going to save our consumers and the state money by not having to be re-fingerprinted upon renewal. We have checked with, there was some concern that we may lose some federal, the Brady check thing, but that's not true because other states don't do that, and they've not had issues. Okay, let's jump on over to section 1.6. It's great desire. In section 1.6, you'll read just real quickly that, this is an exempt list. We're adding people who are currently in the military service, the state of Georgia. They're in there right now. We're also going to add a person 21 years of age or younger who has received an honorable discharge from the military. And at 21, they'll have to do the same license requirements that any of the rest of us do after that moment. Okay, in section 1.7, this is an addition of a bill. This is Representative Battles, and I'll elect to him to come and explain this part.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. You've heard from me before. I think there was about 6.5 hours that we spent total in vetting House Bill 35. I do appreciate the committee's work and being able to incorporate this into this bill. My bill, and now a part of this bill, deals with school security. There was a list of things that I presented to the committee in the very beginning. I wish this was not even necessary, but there's a lot of things that I could wish for. I could wish for a lot of crimes, a lot of severe crimes, and murder and rape and a lot of things that are happening in our society. I wished it would go away. I wished I could cure that, but I can't. I wish that we had the financial resources that we could put a law enforcement officer in every school that we have in our public school system, but we do not have that. Most all of our school systems are stretched and strained because of budget cuts, and they've had to let teachers go and enlarge classroom space. So it brought about we had a need for security, and then we had no money to be able to fill those slots. And so came out of that was some legislation, and I'll go over it with you once again. The particular bill would include the local system, that is the Board of Education, to determine within their ranks those who might qualify and would desire to serve as a campus security officer. After they had determined that, and this is not forced upon them, there's no threats that they would be dismissed if they refuse to take on this responsibility. But after they did that, then that's really when the work begins. They would have to go through an extensive training, which includes mandate training or like type training for security officers within the school system. They would also have to go through all the background checks, all of the psychological evaluation. They would have to go through the training, as I said, with the proficiency of their weapon, with the laws that pertain especially to education, and then they would have to do that on a renewal basis. They'd have to continue to do that so that their proficiency in not only using their weapon but also in continuing their education in the law and recognizing the possibility of someone who might come in to the school to do harm. Not only did we look at the training portion of this, but we also looked at the deterrent, the training, the preparedness, and all of this that is part of this process. I feel the greatest part of this bill is that if someone was determining or thinking about maybe coming in and doing harm to an elementary school or to a middle school, wherever these security officers might be, they might think twice if they thought that there might be someone there to be a kind of a firewall or a blockade to interrupt their plans to do harm to students and faculty. There's also the restriction on the types of weapons that they might carry. That would be concealed weapons. That is not something that we would want to have exposed to the children. The second thing is that we would rather that those that's within the school really not know who that security officer is. We want to keep him as secret as possible, because if that word gets out, then he might or she might be the first one targeted. So along with total local control, and that's what we've talked about ever since I've been here, and this is my 5th year, this would give local control to our school boards. Secondly, it would provide for a security officer in schools where we cannot afford right now to place that person or persons, and providing them with all of the training that they need to be proficient as much as possible, and hopefully will ultimately never have to be used. But just their presence there, I believe, and I've talked to parents and I've talked to others who said, I feel much better knowing that there is someone in my child's school that could intervene in case something like happened there in Newtown and others. So the last portion of this bill talks about the local school system providing security. It also talks about the school zones, those areas that have been determined. Let's say that out in the location where the school bus picks up children, or maybe having to ride on a school bus, as long as it's part of that local system's property, then they would be able to have that weapon on them. This would not allow them to go onto another school property. And I use this as an example. If they were to go to another school to play a sport, this would not allow them to go on some other school's property unless it had been cleared by that school board to allow them to do that. So there's a lot of benefits to this. I know there's a lot of questions, but the benefit of this is that we need the security because there's always that potential of there being one of those cases where we read and we hear about a terrible crime that has been inflicted on school children, and we say, I wish we had responded. And this is one way that we do this. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have to this portion of it, and if not, then I will ask Representative Jasper to come back and finish up. Any questions of me?
Thank you, Chairman Battles. We're going to wait to take questions until the whole bill is completed.
Thank you.
And if you have got time, we would appreciate it if you'd like to stay around. I mean, this committee is pretty. I think this committee is pretty well versed on that section.
Mr. Chairman, what next comes up in 512 is your addition of the airport. Would you like to go ahead and?
I'll address that to the committee. Committee members, line 494 through 509. Issues that we have dealt with and we have seen has happened at commercial airports like Atlanta Airport, where a person goes to the airport to check in and they have left a weapon in their briefcase or suitcase, couldn't find it, didn't know they had it, and what they're finding is they go in and they're being charged with a crime, locked up for 24 hours, charged a $1,000 fine, and there's no clarity to that. And this language, ladies and gentlemen, basically says that no person shall enter the restricted area of a commercial air service airport or in and beyond airport security screening knowingly possessing and knowingly have under his or her control a weapon or a long gun. Section B below that states that if they do and they walk in there knowingly with that weapon, then it's a misdemeanor, and then also if they have criminal intent. Simply put, this just says that if you make a mistake and go into an airport and you have a weapon, take your weapon back to your vehicle if you did not know that you had it on your person. If you have criminal intent, then you will be charged with a felony. That's what that section does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Down section 1A, as we move along toward the end on page 15. This is serious business for the law-abiding citizen who's trying to do the right thing. As I said earlier in my discussion, the people that have licenses, I like to characterize them as rule followers. They do the right thing. They really examine where they can and can't carry their firearm or weapon. and we need a little bit better definition. And so what we've done in this section 1.8 is really put the responsibility of determining these places, the manner in which they can carry to and fro, gun shows, all this stuff, in the hands of the General Assembly that would do it for across the state. One uniform rules that makes clear rules for everyone to follow. We can go on and tell you a few tales about how this is played out for folks, but I really don't need to as we move through. Looking at part 2 and 3, these are changes by legal counsel to correct the code section for the changes that we have made. That's it.
Very good. All right. We're going to stand for questions from the committee at this point.
Yes, sir.
Do you have, you've got an advisor you want to bring up with you to help?
You sure would.
All right. The process that we're entering into, committee members will ask questions of the author of the bill, and then after those questions are asked, then we're going to open this up for anyone who wishes to testify. All right. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question goes to Representative Battle, and it really is just making sure that this section is totally voluntary and it will be chosen only at the pleasure of a local school board.
It is that, and in no way can it be used to coerce them by the threats of dismissal.
Okay. Thank you.
I may add to that, this is the same bill that this committee had perfected a few weeks ago. Quite simply put, that this has left home rule up to each school board. They can choose to designate any member of their personnel. If they do, then they're responsible for the background checks, and there's a list of criteria that they have to adhere to. The school boards are left to set their own policies as long as they go through that list of criteria. Safety training, proficiency, use of deadly force, the type of weapon, ammunition, that's set by the school board. Basically, this gives the school boards the authority. If they want to do it, they do, and if they don't have to. But either way about it, they will not be held liable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because I was just going to say, the beauty of this bill is you may, not you shall. So if any of the school system in the state of Georgia, or all of them, said we're not going to participate in this, there's no recourse. They don't have to. This is only those who wish to do this and take on the responsibility as well as the liability of this.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jasper, my friend in the well.
Yes, sir.
On line 74, we're striking out bars.
Yes, sir.
And then I'm thinking that, bars people get heavily intoxicated on a bar sometimes. It can be a rowdy place. And don't you think that we're putting the patrons or people that frequent these bars at a risk when we allow guns to be carried in the bar?
If you think about it, those folks that do care, this is a private property issue. I think the bar owner is going to be taking responsibility whether to exclude them or let them in. But that's his responsibility now. And the only people that's going to affect right this moment are the licensed carriers, because they're going to do the right thing. Those who are not licensed carriers are going to do it and hide it and do whatever they want to. So we're enabling our folks. I mean, they're not going to go there if they feel that they shouldn't be there.
Thank you.
In my opinion. Would you like to add to that, Ed? Okay.
Representative Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Taylor and you answered most of my questions. I would like, and you touched on it, the liability issue for school systems. And I'm not seeing where, and I'm probably overlooking it. Could you help me out with where the school systems are not assuming liability?
If you'll look on line 484, let's see, let me be sure that's correct. Somewhere in that close vicinity. sorry. That's the exemption that the records are
Okay.
held as
491. I see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
491. All right. Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are on the airport section. I want to make sure that I understand it. As it reads in line 494 and 495, no persons shall enter the restricted access area of a commercial service airport, enter beyond the airport security screening checkpoint, knowingly possessing or knowingly having under his or her control a weapon or long gun. And then in 501, it states a person who violates this code section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, provided, however, that a person who violates this code section with the intent to commit a separate felony offense shall be guilty of a felony. So, as I thought you explained it, you said that if somebody just forgot, then they go back to their car and they're not charged with anything? Is that accurate?
Somebody walks into an airport, and let me give you a little bit of background. And, you know, somebody might could explain to me better, but I've had two attorneys that have scoured the code sections that they can't find a specific code section that says that it is a crime if you have unknowingly, by mistake, taken a weapon in. And what we have found and what we suspect is that in the case of Atlanta Airport, if someone has become more of an inconvenience to the airport and to the police out there, I suspect. But what happens is they charge someone. If it's a mistake, they couldn't find they had a weapon in their briefcase or their suitcase, then they have an automatic 24-hour, put them in jail down in Clayton County for 24 hours, $1,000 fine. Generally, if they go to court, they're told if you're a good boy or a good girl and you pay your fine and we're going to throw a little community service, we're going to drop it. It'll go away. It'll come off your record. You know, it is our belief, what we found, that you're charging them with criminal trespass. But if you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake. If you didn't take that weapon in knowingly. So what we've done is we've crafted the language of stating if you went in unknowingly, took that weapon in, basically take the weapon out, get it out. If you went in and you told them you had the weapon, well, then, you know, then they're going to charge you with a misdemeanor at that point. If there's criminal intent, then they can charge you with a felony.
Okay. My understanding is, generally speaking, issues like this are strict liability, so then it's not left to the prosecutor to try to determine whether somebody knowingly or unknowingly did this. And I hear where you're coming from, but I could also see where everybody would just say, I didn't know and I wasn't aware, and it would make it difficult for prosecutors. I used to be a prosecutor, so that's
frankly,
why I
if
raised
they
that.
didn't have criminal intent, nobody in their right mind is going to take a weapon into an airport knowingly, unless they have criminal intent.
Okay. Thank you.
And the chair will be more than glad to consider if you have any better language as a former prosecutor.
So really, it clarifies that they cannot punish you up to that marked, federal mark. You can't cross this line point, and that has to be provided clear notice. So that probably would be
All right. Let's see. Mr. Holcomb, I'm sorry. Ms. Waits? Representative Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question with respect to the airport. Actually, District 60 sits in portions of the portions of the airport sits in District 60. Did we ever obtain the position of the airport on this matter?
I beg your pardon?
Did we obtain the position of the airport on this matter with respect to this new language?
Well, I can't tell you we've attained the position of the airport, but I can tell you that I spoke with the spokesperson from Atlanta PD, and they said they didn't like the language because they thought that if people were, when they got to the screening, and if they were asked to take that weapon back to their car, that then that car, they were more concerned that that car would then become a marked target for a burglar.
And secondly, Mr. Chairman, what is the reason that someone would need a weapon at the airport? Why would they need it?
I think what we're talking about here is people who accidentally, unknowingly take a weapon in. We're talking about people being charged with a crime or a mistake.
How can we determine the difference? If you have criminal intent, how are we able to make that determination?
If you got criminal intent, you're going to pull that gun out and show it. You're going to pull it out and threaten somebody.
Okay.
Questions? Do we have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to go back for Representative Jackson's question he asked me a moment ago. Under current law, just like it says on line 74, just think about it not being marked out, that unless a bar owner permits, that it's a violation unless the bar owner permits the carrying of weapons or long guns. And so that a bar owner can permit it. And I have not heard or seen in the media today, which is ultra sensitive to anything, a result of something like that you described. If I can go back and just answer that, thank you.
Chairman Neal.
I just have a question on, first of all, Representative Jaspers, thank you for bringing this bill. I had a bill introduced myself that addressed part of this and left it alone because I knew that my bill was in your bill, and I appreciate that. But just a technical question, I guess. If a bar or other private property owner were to choose to not allow weapons on their property, I assume there has to be signage. Is it spelled out in the language how that private property owner is to alert me that I can't have my weapon with me?
You'll look on line 34 of the bill. This is basically the language in the bill.
Okay.
That says that your Second Amendment rights come to an end where the next person's private property rights begins.
Okay.
Now, there's several ways they can do it. They can either put a sign on their door, or they can tell them if they see that they have a weapon.
And that's already outlined in Code Section 16721.
Once they ask them and state their policy, whether it be a church or a restaurant or any private property. We appreciate you, but we don't allow weapons. Please leave. If they don't leave, then they can call the police and they can be escorted out, and I think charged with misdemeanor if they don't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? No more questions of the committee at this time? Then at this time, we're fixing to shift gears and hear public testimony. Could I have the sign-in sheet, please? And let me just give a caveat to this process, ladies and gentlemen. I've been, the committee members have probably received more emails and phone calls on this one issue. And I don't think there's anyone in this building that has concerns about Second Amendment property rights or the public safety that hasn't been interested in this issue. Gosh knows we've had plenty. My administrative assistants in our office has been fielding calls for several weeks now. I think that at the last public meeting where we heard a number of these bills, that we had tried to explain at that time that there would be one bill that would probably encompass all of these things. There's nothing easy about interpreting the code, but it is appears to be the will of the author of this bill, and that's to do some cleanup language, basically on the Second Amendment rights, something logical, and that's been the process. That being said, we're going to call people up to speak. Old friend Hank Huckabee. Mr. Chancellor.
I know it's been a long day already. I think it's going to be a little longer, so I'll try to be very, very brief in my comments. And I would say that we have several people with us from our campuses who work more closely day to day with students and faculty than either Ron Jackson and I do, and if you have time, we'd appreciate them to have a moment to read some statements into the record. As you know, I appear before you today as the Chancellor of the University System of Georgia, a system of 31 institutions with 314,000 students and over 40,000 faculty and staff. But I'm more than a chancellor. In fact, the most important thing I think I've done, I'm also a father and a grandfather. I'm a gun owner with many lifelong friends who own guns and are hunters. Like many of you, therefore, I have experience with guns and kids and grandkids. Guns do not frighten me, and I do not demonize those who do own guns. I believe in the Second Amendment, but in this matter before us, I realize and acknowledge that you and I may see this issue very differently. In my position, I believe strongly that allowing our students to carry weapons on our campuses will not increase their personal safety, but instead reduce it. I spent a large part of my career working on college campuses. I've served in the administrations at both smaller institutions and at the state's flagship. I can tell you that I've seen it all while there, and my experience tells me that for our students, and the availability of guns will not increase their safety. Each of the police chiefs on our campuses agree with me. They're charged with keeping the public safety on our campuses, and they will tell you allowing students to have weapons on campus will make their jobs harder, not easier, more dangerous, and not safer. Our campus counselors will likely tell you the same thing. The reality, unfortunately, of modern campuses is that we have students who come to us with a variety of personal issues, which those issues create stress among themselves. Many of them are also on medications. Furthermore, many develop issues after they come to our campuses. And I'm not suggesting that every student is a ticking time bomb, far from it. I am suggesting, though, that adding loaded weapons to an already potentially volatile mix of youthful exuberance, stress, and yes, at times, alcohol and other factors could lead to a strategy of our own making that we could otherwise avoid. Georgia law already goes further than many states that have passed concealed carry laws. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, in 23 states, the decision to ban or allow concealed weapons on campuses is made by each college or university individually. And from the calls we have made, the states are consistent in implementing policies which keep guns in the hands only of law enforcement. In Georgia, we permit a carry holder to keep their weapon locked in the car, which the Supreme Court considers an extension of one's domicile. To those of you who believe strongly in this bill, I respect your views and your right to hold them. I know, having sat where you sit, you deal with very few simple issues, and I understand that. I'm confident that you are motivated, as am I, by a desire to ensure that our campuses are as safe as we can possibly make them. I'm not sure there's anything I can say to you today to convince you that the provisions of this bill will be detrimental to campus safety. So let me conclude by just saying unequivocally, the Board of Regents, my administration, our 31 presidents, and our campus security chiefs all believe that current law makes our campuses safe, and I would plead that you keep it in place. To the members of the committee, I appreciate what you're doing. You're carrying out your responsibility, and I value your friendship. Chairman Powell, I'm grateful for the opportunity to express our views to you and the committee today.
Thank you, Chancellor.
And Chairman Powell and committee members, I join the Chancellor here today to bring you the opinion of the Technical College System of Georgia regarding this bill. We simply at TCSG support the current law regarding firearms on campus. Students may keep their weapons securely locked in their vehicles while they are attending classes or participating in campus activities. We certainly respect the Second Amendment rights of Georgians, and many of our students, faculty, staff are lawful and competent gun owners. However, campuses that might have unlimited abilities of licensed gun owners to carry weapons into classrooms and all campus locations, we believe will threaten safety rather than increase safety. We at TCSG, through our police departments, our police chiefs, and our working relationships with local law enforcement, work very diligently to maintain a safe learning environment for all TCSG campuses. With both our professional campus police departments and those local law enforcement enforcement agencies, our campuses, we believe, are safe today. Our law enforcement professionals will be given new challenges for maintaining safety and order with weapons in the hands of multiple students, faculty, and staff. TCSG is a primary workforce training venue for non-traditional students. Many of our students are in challenging circumstances in their lives and careers. Life stresses are common, and emotions often run high, whether they are over grades, between students, complaints with faculty, and weapons. In any of these circumstances can only create a volatile situation. I, like the Chancellor, respect the honorable authors and supporters of this bill. Everyone in this room and about this issue on both sides have the intent of increasing personal safety. We at the Technical College System, our state board, our 25 presidents, and our police chiefs believe strongly that student and campus safety are best served by professional, trained, and certified law enforcement officers. I appreciate the opportunity to bring these opinions before the committee, and Chairman will be glad to answer any questions. We do have some representatives from the university who would like to come forward and make some statements. Chancellor?
Might as well get those up there, and if y'all want to just stay right there. Always good to see you, gentlemen.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Laura Bowen. I live in Monroe County in Bolingbroke, Georgia. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Georgia, and I have been for over the past 10 years. I'm currently the Director of Counseling and Disability Services at Gordon State College in Barnesville, Georgia. I've also worked in the counseling centers at Macon State College and the College of Coastal Georgia. In addition, I have been a clinical instructor of clinical psychiatry at Mercer University School of Medicine. I come to you concerned over the current bill as a counselor on a college campus and as a citizen who has a carry permit in the state of Georgia. I've had one for the past 3 years. I carry a Rossi 38 primarily for protection, and I also own several other weapons, pistols, and shotguns. I do not carry my weapon on campus, even though with a license I could and leave it in my car. I do not feel that it is appropriate for me or any other person other than the public safety officers on campus to carry a weapon on campus. If I need protection, our current protocol is to contact public safety. I do not want to be faced with protecting myself from a student or anyone else who's carrying a concealed weapon. As the director of the counseling center at Gordon State, I and the 2 other counselors in my office see students for personal, academic, career, and disability counseling. When students present to us for counseling, often they walk in and are upset and in crisis. These students have been upset over their interactions with family members, staff, other students, or faculty. Some of these students seek counseling as a way to let off steam. Oftentimes, the students that we see have psychiatric diagnosis, some that have been diagnosed and some that have never been diagnosed, but are evident by the behavior that they display and their poor decisions. During my time working on a college campus, observing both traditional and non-traditional students as a member of the Student Affairs Division, I have often witnessed students who make poor decisions in the heat of the moment. On my campus in particular, an area of concern is for the safety of myself and my staff in their offices. Counseling sessions are conducted in our private offices behind closed doors. There's one door in and one door out of our office. Oftentimes, when discussing sensitive issues, the student will become tearful, upset, and will escalate due to the strong emotions that they are experiencing. Students in this heightened emotional state carrying a concealed weapon is a scary prospect for myself and my counselors. Some of our students have psychological problems that they cannot afford to seek treatment for, and oftentimes cannot afford the psychotropic medication that is needed to treat their psychiatric disorder. There are other occasions around campus where conflicts or emotions can run high, and I have the concerns about the level of maturity, the ability of the student to make a rational decision when feelings become hurt. They become angry or feel threatened, either a real or a perceived threat. Our students are not bad people. They are just people who occasionally make the wrong decision in the heat of the moment. When this occurs, it is important that we contact public safety to assist with their knowledge and professional training. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And what college is this?
Gordon State College in Barnesville.
Thank you.
I was going to say good afternoon, but I believe I'll change that to good evening. Good to see you folks, Mr. Chairman and committee, and thank you, Chancellor, for allowing me to speak. My name is Ted Cochran, and I'm the Director of Public Safety at Kennesaw State University. June the 20th will be my 30th year there. Prior to that, I spent 9 years with the Cobb County Police Department, and I am committed to the safety and security of the 24,600 students at Kennesaw State University. And due to quite a number of reasons, I think this bill will make my job harder and not easier. And the reason that I think that is, first of all, the law that we've got in place now that you folks did, I think, a very good job of doing. I support that law. I think it works. I don't see any reason to change it. And I've heard two comments about the school shootings, the one at Virginia Tech and also at the elementary school. And I've heard about the fingerprint, the process that you go through to get a gun license. There's a tremendous amount of difference in that and the training that police officers go through in reference to addressing active shooters. We don't want to send an untrained person into combat, and we would not expect an untrained person that has the most minimum of requirements as far as the gun license to be involved in a situation in our campus. And just a couple of scenarios that I thought about. We've got, we train with Cobb County Police Department, we train with State Patrol, we train with Atlanta PD. We know each other, we know what to expect of each other. When we have these types of crisis situations, we have a model. If the first officer that arrives there, if there's shooting going on, that officer is going in. That officer is, if there's a person in there that's a good guy that's shooting a gun, that either my officer or that person is probably not going to survive that first incident. And I thought about other things too. What if our first officer is a plainclothes officer and he goes in and gets mistaken as a bad guy by the good guy that's in there that we don't know? The community at Kennesaw State, when they see somebody with a gun, our telephone lines light up, and we check that out. The community expectation is that the only people that have guns on campus legitimately are police department, public safety. Y'all excuse me just a sec. I'm also I'm right with the chancellor. I'm a father, grandfather. I've got 4 daughters that went to college in the University of Georgia system, and I also own guns, and I'm also a supporter of the Second Amendment. And okay, that concludes my remarks this time, and I'll be available for questions during that period.
Thank you, Ted. Chief?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you for the citizens of Georgia that are concerned enough to show up. My name is Joe Markham. I'm a 42-year veteran of law enforcement. I started with Gwinnett Police in 1971. I retired in 2000 and became the chief at Gwinnett Technical Colleges, one of the first police departments in the TCSG system. We saw a need, Commissioner saw a need for law enforcement and campus safety to improve. You know, we take a look back at the critical incidents that have occurred on college campuses, but it really started at Columbine, and we started looking at things we do different. Columbine, we waited for special weapons and tactics to get there. We'd surround and hold a perimeter and just keep letting them shooting until the, you know, Hut 2, 3, 4 boys got there with the special weapons and the nice armor. What has happened since Virginia Tech is we form a hasty team. That's the first 3 officers there, and now it's down to 1 to make entry to eliminate the threat, either by extreme prejudice or taking the subject in custody. I was speaking to a young man in the hall when I excused myself a few minutes ago, and he stated why my opposition. My opposition is the same as Ted's. I can't tell who the good guys are and the bad guys are in a critical incident. Don't have time to check permits. Don't know what their reliability level is, how well they shoot, what retention level their holsters are that they're walking around campus that somebody can just snatch away from them. There are certain things that are not provided in the concealed carry law that says people have to be trained and know how to use that weapon and know the nomenclature. Our job is to protect those students. You know, there was a paradigm shift several years ago when students used to call an institution and say, well, what kind of education will we get if we send our children there? And now it's, is your school safe? And they want statistical data at our safety. And right now, we're safe. We conduct ourselves professionally on our campus. All my officers, as I call us, the geriatric police department, have 30 years or more. Those individuals have been hired by me that worked with me at Gwinnett Police. I know their ethics, I know their backgrounds, and I know their capabilities. For the citizens and right to carry, I'm an avid firearms person. I've been hunting since I was 6 years old. I started collecting when I was 18, and I understand the need to have a firearm. But we're not to the point that we need them openly carried or concealed carried by everybody on our campus. And I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to try to, do y'all have anyone else? There's a few that I see that are with the university system. I'm going to ask them to come up, and then if there's questions, maybe ask the assemblage. Dr. Dan McAlexander from LaGrange College.
Just as long as they let me know who they're going.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the perspective of a private college president and the position of Georgia Independent Colleges Association regarding the impact of HB 512. I am president of LaGrange College, and I also serve as vice chair of GICA. I'm here serving in our chair's stead due to his lack of availability today. I'm also joined today by Chief Henry Hope, Chief of Police and Director of Campus Security at Agnes Scott College, who lends his support to my remarks today. Chief Hope, if you would stand, please. Thank you so much. GICA is comprised of 25 traditional, not-for-profit liberal arts colleges serving Georgians throughout the state. The 71,000 students who attend our colleges, whether resident or commuting, have enjoyed safe, comfortable environments where learning and personal development are paramount. Current law regarding campus safety and the possession of weapons on campus has proven effective. GICA endorses the current law related to college and university campuses, public and private, which since 2010 has allowed licensed gun carriers to pass through and park on college campuses with guns secured in their vehicles. This law has proven effective on both public and private college campuses. SB 512 allows carry deeper onto our campuses, where I, as the president, through our campus security, and some of my colleagues through their campus police forces, are charged with protecting students, faculty, administrators, visitors, guests, and contractors. We do not believe, nor can we foresee situations where the introduction of people carrying weapons on our campuses will be a good thing. This legislative imposed introduction of weapons on a college campus potentially creates new and unnecessary contingencies should an incident occur. If people other than police are allowed to carry weapons on our campuses, then police and security personnel will face additional decisions about the role of various players in an emergency or life-threatening situation. Under campus carry, the licensed gun carrier who is revealing a weapon may become the target of police attention, action, or apprehension. Under current law, the police know that people who belong on campus or who are acting appropriately will not be carrying guns. Some of you have told us that private colleges will be covered under the language which empowers private property owners to determine if and where guns may be carried on campus. We are grateful for the recognition of private property owners' rights in this matter. However, the proposed changes in the law would shift the burden of communication of more restrictive exceptions to the law on private campuses for the private colleges, a daunting and nearly impossible task on many of our campuses, which are spread across hundreds of acres, have multiple access points, and are intersected daily by countless people who do not know of those exceptions. We believe this proposed change to current law will create confusion on the part of the general public and complicate our capacity to enforce what has heretofore been a simple, clear policy regarding the possession of guns on all college and university campuses, public or private. We join our sister public institutions in Georgia today in promoting safe, positive environments on higher education campuses throughout the state, whether these locations be public or private. Whether the locations are for sleeping, eating, learning, or cheering on a beloved team, current gun carry laws have proven protective of Georgia's students. We are here today to state our support of the state's public college sectors and each of the university's system and technical college system institutions, and to defend the interests of our private campus communities by declaring our support of current law. Thank you for having me speak.
Thank you, Dr. McAlexander. Who else? Let's see. We have Wayne Seelig and Ann Washington from Morehouse.
Hello, my name is Wayne Seelig. I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to voice my support for House Bill 512. I think it's a great bill, and when it's passed, it'll be a huge step towards restoring our Second Amendment right without taking any steps backward. My wife and I will better be able to protect ourselves throughout the course of our daily lives when this bill passes. I like the idea of not being disarmed and having my Second Amendment rights stripped away while attending church or while walking into a government building that doesn't have security personnel. I'm also pleased to see that bars have been removed from the off-limits list, as well as some portions of campuses. I've read the Second Amendment many times, and I don't see anywhere where our founding fathers wrote anything up about exempting college students from that. So I don't agree with our previous speakers on that. and I think any step towards removing these limits is a positive one. Unfortunately, as we've seen in recent events, it's become an undeniable fact that evil people do not care about whether or not they are breaking any gun laws when they set out to do evil. Law-abiding citizens are the ones who care about operating within the law. In areas where we're legally forced to disarm, those who mean to cause harm to others remain unchecked and can operate freely without worry of equal opposition. The bill effectively reduces the number of these dangerous gun-free victim zones. Eventually, for the sake of safety, I, and I believe many others, would like to see these zones eliminated altogether, since they are only off-limits to those who have regard for the law to begin with. House Bill 512 is a bill that I fully support, and I ask that you support it too. Please help restore the Second Amendment and move this bill forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Miss Ann Washington, or I'm sorry, you don't look like an Ann to me.
It's actually Andre Washington, like Andre without the D. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. I rise in opposition to House Bill 512. First, I want to say thank you for giving us the time in this space. I am the 81st Student Government Association President at Morehouse College. Not only do I represent Morehouse College today, I'm standing on behalf of the Atlanta University Center and speaking on behalf of President Tyler Green of Clark Atlanta University, President Anita Foster of Spelman College, and I also want to express the sentiments of President Ashish Gandhi of Emory University, as well as Aron Mordell, the undergraduate president at Georgia Tech, all of whom have expressed opposition, and their student senators have passed legislation, their student senators have passed legislation in opposition to campus carry. So, as well-intended as it may be, it is a bad idea. It is a bad idea, and as the first student to speak, we've had our administrators and our public safety. So we have administrators, we have college presidents, we have the chief of police for us, and now we have students speaking against campus carry. My question then becomes, who is this legislation being made for and crafted for if everybody's speaking against it? So here are my 3 points of why Morehouse College specifically stands in against campus carry. One, the philosophical tradition of our institution of nonviolence. If the choice is between fear and violence, then we fight. But we have other options. We won't fight, or we won't be frightened into carrying more guns on campus. We won't allow fear of violence to say that everybody needs to be protecting themselves by arming themselves when we go to class, when we come from class. We trust our public safety. We trust the Atlanta Police Department. We trust the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. Point two, we want to use as a model the Student Advisory Safety Committee that City Council President Cesar Mitchell has convened, that we've worked over the past 8 months, that has brought together the task force of the public safety of each private institutions and public institutions, Atlanta Police Department, Crime Stoppers, and elected officials on the local level to address issues of public safety. It's been everything from lighting to safe areas on how to get to and from MARTA stations. It has increased patrols, opened up many precincts right outside of our campus. It's actually making progress. We trust those professionals to do their job. I feel more comfortable and more safe as a student knowing that the professionals are going to be minutes away rather than a colleague of mine or a friend of mine feeling like wants to defend himself and having to take out a gun and shoot at somebody. I would much rather know that my public safety is going to do their job and do what they're paid for. And a final point, we want to make sure that this committee, we trust you guys to do the right thing and to listen to the students and listen to the administrators and listen to the people who are on the ground. As a former resident advisor who deals with students going through the transitional process of adjusting to their first year, as a student leader, and also just as a man, I am on campus. I travel to many campuses, and we see the issues that people face. We trust the public safety officials. We trust the professionals to do their job. So please, we beg you to listen to the students, to listen to the professionals that are on the ground, and not try to solve an issue by creating a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. If I might ask, Morehouse is a private college?
Yes, sir. Morehouse is a private institution.
You do understand that in this legislation that's being proposed, that private property rights would prevail at Morehouse.
And we do understand that, but Morehouse, we have a lot of visitors that come in on and off campus. That would require us to put up new signage saying that we are a gun-free zone or gun-free campus. We are an urban campus, and we do have openings and many entrances of where people from off campus come on and are not aware of our rules and regulations, from as simple things as far as dress and decorum, and how we present ourselves at Morehouse College. Not everybody adheres to those standards, and that presents a particular challenge for our public safety, who are stretched in trying to address public safety issues in general. But that means we have to have more signs up, more education to people who won't necessarily be open to that level of education. Any more questions from the committee? I apologize. Yes. Yes, ma'am, there was a shooting at the edge of our campus outside of Archer Hall, and it was actually from one student to the next. And I use that as an example. I'm glad you lifted that up as an example, because the students on campus didn't have guns. But my worst fear would be that my Morehouse brothers would reach into their bag and pull out their gun and begin shooting at another student from another institution. So instead of having one student shooting and wrong for having guns on campus, someone legally being able to pull out a gun and shoot back at the student, and instead of having one isolated incident of shooting and APD responding in minutes, myself right outside of the incident seeing what happens, and when campus police respond in minutes, you have a shootout. And then you have an active shooter pan, and you can't tell who is who. You have students that are in plain clothes and basketball shorts, and you have another student that's in a hoodie. How can you tell who started the incident? How can you do the investigation? Both of them are shooting. It could have created a real problem.
Questions?
No more questions? Thank you.
We do have one. Yes, sir.
Quick question about referencing that shooting.
Yes, sir.
Were those both of those individuals who started that carrying concealed permit holders in the state of Georgia?
I do know that one of them was 21. I have not read the policy.
Were they carrying concealed permit holders? I don't know. I don't care if they're 21 or not.
I'm not sure. I do not know.
Thank you.
But I would like to say that carrying concealed weapons does not solve the problem. Guns on campuses, including if there were people who had permits, if they were able to pull out guns, putting more guns in the situation statistically is going to increase shootings. That's more guns in an environment will increase shootings. Removing guns at all will not increase. Will make sure that shootings do not happen. Introducing guns into the situation does not solve the issue.
Representative Waits.
For the other student that came up earlier, he was in the audience, the other young man. Forgive me. I have a question. And like many individuals in the room, I too am a proponent of second rights amendments. And so I want to make sure that we're making the right decisions. In your expert opinion, if we were to relive the Virginia Tech shooting and we were to have allowed weapons on that campus, do you think the results would have been different? Do you think we would have saved lives that day?
Yes, ma'am. I think they very well could have been. Shootouts are generally over very quickly, and police, like everyone's saying, are minutes away. And by that point, there's a lot to go on, and the shootings can just get progressively worse. Whereas if someone were allowed to carry on campus legally, they could end the threat a lot quicker.
Okay. And just one final point. The premise has been a lot that, this is for good law-abiding citizens who adhere to concealed carry. Good law-abiding citizens will do what it takes to get their concealed weapons, and I am a proponent for Second Amendment. But my question is, not everybody does the right thing all the time. Circumstances prevail where people feel paranoid, feel threatened, and they make rash decisions in the moment that are not logical, that are not rational. So the idea that everybody is always going to do the right thing, if that was the case, we wouldn't have an issue of gun violence, because not everybody who uses a gun got it illegally or was doing the wrong thing. There are sometimes people who got guns legally and have done things the wrong way, and we all know those stories. We all have heard those stories. So again, the only solution is making sure that guns are in the hands of professionals. Do not introduce guns into a situation to solve the issue. And that's the position of the men of Morehouse. That is the position of the Atlanta University students. And I think that is the position of other students across the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Not so fast. You've got some more questions.
Oh.
If I might ask before we go to the next question, do you think that you're obviously a very educated man, but
Yes.
do you think that natural instincts that people are born with gives them a feeling that they should be able to protect themselves?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think that, your instincts, yes, sir. You can be guided by your instincts. But I think it's dangerous to leave it just to instincts alone, because sometimes instincts don't entertain logic or an understanding of protocol or procedures. And then outside of that, instincts can be moved by emotion. So, for example, my father, who works in Afghanistan and is a civilian servant and former military, his training and his instincts will kick in the moment, you know, that he needs. So whatever training he has. But to a person that has a gun and no training but just instincts, their instincts may be waned from one direction to the next.
Mr. Lundson.
That's a good question. I'm saying more guns introduced to more situations do increase more violence. Yes, the United States of America has very liberal policy when it comes to gun control. In comparison to other developed... What do you mean, what is my source? Okay, the statistic, I'm not, I didn't quote any statistics, but sociologically speaking, in our country, that's my discipline, examining this discussion from a sociological lens. In our country, we have more liberal gun laws. Indeed, it is my opinion, but I'll affirm it and say this, that in our country, we have liberal gun laws, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's a beautiful thing about our country. But in juxtaposition to other countries that have more comprehensive, more stringent gun policies, we have more shootings. We do have more shootings. That's the truth, just in a general sense. I'm not saying that people that go through the necessary requirements are going to use their guns in the wrong way. I'm saying that in this particular sensitive circumstance, college campuses in this particular place, with the particular needs that they have here, not everywhere else, but specifically on college campuses, let's trust our trained officials that have years and years of experience to do their job and to allow them to protect the students and provide for a safe learning environment, because not everybody that you would empower to have guns on campuses adheres to the logic and the sound reasoning that you good people do.
Any other questions of Mr. Washington? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lamar Wise. Always a pleasure.
Young gentleman just ended with something about sound logic, and there are many good things in this bill about carrying in the church, so forth. But the portions in here that deal with, there are a couple that I'd like to address. One of them dealing with the mental health and sound logic of our elected officials. I'm sure all of you are very logical, intelligent people, but the mental health of the nation that goes into a debt like it is, perhaps one would judge that as being a bit of a problem. But focusing on a couple of these issues, one is on line 278, page 9. This discusses the people convicted of a felony and the territory's possession and dominions. I'm not sure exactly what dominions of the United States are.
Could you repeat, what was that line number again, Lamar?
278. It's different from the bill I had printed out earlier by the line number. This the one? Yes.
Are you speaking from the original bill or the substitute?
This is the bill that was handed out right before the committee meeting. Your assistant handed it out.
Law.
Yes, and I just wish to point out something in that current law, that to allow courts of any foreign nations that to deny the due process and a jury decision in having their rights taken away in that manner should be of big concern to this committee. The idea of due process in the international courts is something not understood. Some courts, so for instance, in France, they don't have a contempt position. So I would just ask the committee to think about this, whether it's part of the current law or not, as being something very dangerous to the constitutional rights of each person here. So we're here on the Second Amendment rights, which, were discussed as being controversial, but to me they're not controversial. They're simply natural rights. You, Mr. Chairman, said, is there a natural instinct when you're born? Well, there's a natural birth into our natural rights. And it was simply written down in the Constitution as the Second Amendment. There's so many we can't count them. They felt necessary to write some of them down. The desire to defend yourself is extremely important. So, also you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, about the prevailing of property rights. I don't know exactly how one can say an oath or affirmation to the Constitution of the United States and not respect property rights. They are encroached upon every day by the governing bodies of this country and throughout the world. One of the reasons why we should be careful when foreign nations make decisions that we decide to uphold. The other part that I wanted to address is the mental health part. And there's some languages in there, and this bill has different lines, but the judges shall keep the hospital treatment information confidential, and it shall be at the discretion of the judge, considering the circumstances surrounding and the recommendations of the superintendent. I don't recognize sufficient due process or adjudication in those cases. The presenter of the bill in the beginning that worked over this and put all these different parts together, I would have preferred some of the standalone bills to be clear in church carry, campus carry, etc., which wouldn't seem a problem to me. But giving more power to the probate courts. These are courts that generally, almost exclusively, do not have jury trial. Probate courts, the gentleman is correct, the representative that said that, are extremely powerful individuals. And investing even more power with these individuals, no matter how judicious or how well chosen to be judges, is a risk when a judge that perhaps is not as professional as other judges is dealing with your problem or my problem or any of the gentlemen or gentleladies in this room's problem. As I said in the last hearing I spoke to you before, I just don't believe that any person's natural rights, their constitutional rights, should be removed by them without a chance of a trial with a jury of 12 people. And the circumstances of the mental health, one of the statements in here is a doctor or a psychologist. They could be a psychiatrist, this is a medical doctor. Psychologist is not a medical doctor. I just find that to live in a society that wants to import the decisions of a Russian court, if necessary, and wishes to, it just doesn't function in a true society that respects liberty of each and every individual. So, one can speculate why that is the case, and I would say, disrespect for the ideas of government by, and for the people. It's an unwillingness to part with power on the part of those in authority. And the only reason I can think of this, they distrust their citizenry. There's no reason to distrust the citizens of the United States, of the state of Georgia. With guns on campus, with I believe last time we had someone speak that was 24, 25 who goes to Georgia State. Why she can't have a gun in her dormitory when she comes and goes would not be able to be done in this bill to protect herself. Because no matter how much trust that one wants to put into their public service officials defending their interests, I mean, we have these fine state patrolmen here. If I was the means to ask one of them if they were willing to go around with me and protect me the rest of my life, that would be very interesting. But this is an impractical thing. People have to be responsible for themselves, for personal responsibility, for each person taking that responsibility. And the perfect security of the state will not protect us
And we were granted liberty and justice for each individual, and we can only fight to try to gain that back. And I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be willing to answer them.
You do have a question, Representative Waits? Not if you pass. Anyone have a question? Thank you, Lamar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I might just give a critique to that. Remember, for those of y'all who are reading this substitute, this is existing law. Not saying it is good, but you know, that's what we're trying to do, and it's trying to clean up a lot of this, trying to hit the main points. But I will also have to remind everybody, I have emailed a good many folks back and to remind them that this is a legislative process. It takes a majority of this committee to pass a bill forward. It takes a majority of the Rules Committee to pass it forward. It takes a majority of the members of the House of Representatives to pass a bill out. Once passed, it goes to the Senate, and it goes through the same process. At any member of the House or the Senate or committee can recommend changes or amendments. And then there's a little fact that the governor has got by law the right to either veto or to sign the legislation. So in crafting this legislation, we've tried to hit on things that would be logical. Some of it may not seem so logical, but quite frankly, we're trying to open this up. And I thank you for taking your time to be here tonight. Thank you. Let's see. Next up, Catherine Hudson.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Catherine Hudson. I've lived in Marietta, Georgia for 25 years. I have never come to speak before a committee at the State House for tonight. I'm here representing Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And I represent moms currently at home with their children tonight who cannot be here. Here in Georgia, we have laws that protect citizens from unauthorized, untrained, or drunk drivers because they would be a threat to the welfare of our citizens. We believe that we need similar common sense protections from untrained or drunk gun owners. A recent poll of Georgians commissioned by our local station 11 Alive provides this data. 90% of Georgians are following this issue of gun legislation very closely. 56% of Georgians believe that we should have a federal ban on assault weapons, new assault weapons. 75% of us believe that we should require background checks on all gun buyers, including private sales between individuals. 56% of us believe that we should limit the amount of ammunition a given gun can hold. 80% of us believe that a permit should be required to carry a concealed weapon. And finally, 65% of Georgians believe that guns should not be permitted in churches. 64% believe they should not be permitted on college campuses. Moms Demanding Action urge you to act upon the wishes of Georgia's citizens who cannot be here tonight, many of whom do not know about this legislation. The majority of the Georgia citizens do not want it to be easier to carry a gun. We do not want more guns in schools, in churches, on college campuses, in airports, or in bars. There's one more thing I'd like to speak to. I wasn't planning to, but someone asked a question earlier about where the evidence is, the data around mass shootings, gun deaths in the United States. And I pulled out my phone and did a very quick search. and I found an article from the Washington Post, and I'd like to share some of the data in it. It was published on December 14th, 2:07 p.m. I think many of you know the relevance of that date. Shooting sprees are not rare in the United States. Mother Jones has tracked and mapped every shooting spree in the last 3 decades. Since 1982, there have been at least 61 mass murders carried out with firearms across the country, with the killings unfolding in 30 states, from Massachusetts to Hawaii. And in most cases, the killers had obtained their weapons legally. There's a graph. The yellow bar, whoops, excuse me. I love phones. Stop. The yellow bar shows how many deaths were from guns that had been obtained legally, as opposed to the green bar. 15 of the 25 worst mass shootings in the last 50 years took place in the United States. I'm going to skip down to a couple others that address some of the questions that you asked. More guns tend to mean more homicide. The Harvard Injury Control Research Center assessed the literature on guns and homicide and found that there's substantial evidence that indicates more guns means more murders. This holds true whether you're looking at different countries or different states. Citations here. I'd be happy to share this with you if you'd like that information. Next, states with stricter gun control laws have fewer deaths from gun-related violence. Last year, economist Richard Florida dove deep into the correlations between gun deaths and other kinds of social indicators. States with tighter gun control laws appear to have fewer gun-related deaths. And there's a map that shows how tight the laws are and which states have the highest number of deaths. It highlights states which have one of 3 gun control restrictions in place: assault weapons bans, trigger locks, safe storage requirements. Firearm deaths are significantly lower in states with stricter gun control legislation. So this was published in December 14th. So I'd like to close by asking you to honor the concerns of Georgia citizens rather than those who stand to benefit financially from increased gun ownership. And I thank you very much for your time.
And we thank you, ma'am. Mr. Robert Eager, students. Mr. Eager.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm currently a 4th-year student at Georgia Tech, where I've seen many students victimized by violent crime over the years. Our police department does a superb job of minimizing crime on our campus. Response time are excellent. Our law enforcement does the best within their means to prevent students from being victimized by all forms of crime. However, last year at Georgia Tech, looking at our overall crime rate in 2011, we saw 32 violent crimes against students. We see on a per capita basis, by going to Georgia Tech, I'm over 7 times more likely to be victimized by violent crime than if I'd attended UGA. That's a similar rate with what we see to Georgia State and other metro campuses. Simply choosing to go to a school in a metropolitan area where I'm unable to defend myself shouldn't mean that I should become the victim of violent crime. We've seen a number of individuals here today cite fears of guns on campus resulting in mass shooting sprees, suggesting that concealed carry license holders, who in states contain the most relevant statistics, for example, the Bureau of Justice Statistics in Texas, are 10 times less likely than the general population on a per capita basis to commit any crime, as suddenly becoming irresponsible individuals when they cross the border onto a campus. These are individuals who carry with them every day in crowd gathering situations, which we've seen removed with Senate Bill 308. These individuals carried in malls now for 3 years. They've carried in other places where crowds together. They haven't seen mass shootings. The testimony we've heard this evening regarding mass shootings is very similar to what has been seen in other states when they first allowed concealed carry. I'd like to read from some testimony given before Virginia passed concealed carry, indicating that some of our public safety concerns, which we imagined or anticipated a couple of years ago, to our pleasant surprise, have been unfounded or mitigated, according in Fairfax County in the Alexandria Journal when they reported. Similarly, in Dallas, when they passed laws, a police chief indicated, the president actually of the Dallas Police Association, indicated I lobbied against the law in 93 and 95 because I thought it would lead to wholesale armed conflict. That hasn't happened. All the horror stories I thought would come to pass didn't happen. No boogeyman. I think it's all worked out well. And that says good things about the citizens who have permits. I'm a convert. We've seen similar testimony in other states. When citizens who have gone through the permitting process, who have obtained a firearm, decide to defend themselves against the threat of their lives or against violent crime, they're not making a decision to take on the role of a public safety individual. You're not taking a decision to rush into a mass shooting. You're taking a decision of defending yourself in that room, defending yourself against a mugging on Georgia Tech's campus. Choosing when you're going to use that firearm is another line. Individuals have shown to be able to do that. In fact, more successfully than police officers generally in the United States. As an individual, you're 5 times less likely to shoot an innocent individual than as a law enforcement agent during the same time span. Sure, law enforcement agents have a higher confrontation rate, but being able to identify your threat is instinctual, as we discussed earlier. No amount of training can tell you that this is not your threat. It can tell you how to better carry the weapon, how to fire more accurately. But judging your backstop is something that's rather obvious. It's what we see in basic firearms training, first day out. We've seen students at Georgia Tech comment on this issue before. The last time a comprehensive campus survey was proposed was in 2010, which was given voluntarily to campus. 52% of students on our campus, which is in our newspaper article this week, were against the passage of House Bill 615 and 308 that year. 48% were in favor of it. In fact, Aaron Mordell, our SGA president this year, testified in favor of Senate Bill 308 and House Bill 615, which would allow carry on campus. He's since changed his viewpoint on that matter. But there are a number of students here who are in support of being able to defend themselves on campus. Students have shown the ability to carry safely in their vehicles. Students were afraid that being able to carry in your car meant that whenever a shooting happened, whenever a crime happened, you'd run to your car and get your gun and run around trying to find the target. That's not what concealed carry is about. It's about self-defense. It's not about becoming a police officer. We saw these same individuals testify against it then, who are now saying they're in favor of Senate Bill 308, which is an unfortunate discrepancy. However, we've seen students be able to comport themselves safely even on campus. In numerous areas across the country, students can carry. Over 200 campuses allow individuals to carry firearms onto their campus. No student has misused their firearm since those allowances were put in place on those campuses. These are responsible individuals over the age of 21 who have a Georgia weapons license, who have gone through the process of obtaining that license not to commit crime. If they're going to commit crime, if they're going to use their firearm irresponsibly, they would have ignored the gun-free zone sign that we have in place in the law right now. There's no necessity of them ignoring the fact they're going to get slapped on the wrist for bringing a gun onto campus when they're facing murder charges. People who have a Georgia weapons license have been able to comport themselves safely. We trust our students to comport themselves safely when they're 5 feet off of our campus, yet we disarm them the moment they cross the barrier onto our campus. This bill before us today eliminates some of the major barriers in allowing students to defend themselves when they walk to and from class inside of campus buildings. Unfortunately, dormitories are not addressed. I'd like to see those addressed in the future, but as a good step in providing student safety, I'd support House Bill 512 and allowing students to be able to better defend themselves on our campuses against violent crime and against occasional mass shooter situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break. I think I have some members that are about to float out of their seats. And when we come back, and while the chair certainly does believe that everybody needs to be heard, if there's redundancy, just speed it up because we need to take action on this bill. 10 minutes. Could everybody have a seat, please? Thank you. And we've got everybody. We'll reconvene. Stephen Green, and I think you have a group with you. Thank you for offering to come up together so we could cut some time off of this. All right, and if you would tell us who you are, and I'll mark your names off.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman, and good evening, committee. My name is Tyra Beeman. I'm a first-year student at Spelman College. I'm an international studies, political science double major, and Spanish minor. And today I'm representing not only the ladies of Spelman, but all the students of the AUC, the Atlanta University Center. As we deserve a vote, resonated through the air, surrounding the Georgia Capitol stairs at the conclusion of the Remember and Act rally last Tuesday. College students stood alongside state legislators and community organizers in an effort to simply be heard. We are living with the reality that more than 2,500 young people die per year in the U.S. We are confronted by the reality that nearly 87% of all children killed by guns in the world are killed on American soil, and the reality of a disconnected legislative body often forgetting the voice of its constituents when proposing legislation. Most significantly, we are living in a time that demands action, demands unity, and change even when most did not expect it. However, prior expectations have little importance or influence on Georgia's City of Atlanta Student Safety Advisory Council, as I represent, as we recognize that sometimes the time picks you, sometimes you pick the time. However, right now, the time has picked us, quoted by Secretary of Education. Haunted yet motivated by the countless shootings on college campuses across the U.S., and the state of Georgia specifically, students recognize that the tragedies of this time are demanding our action. Consequently, students alongside more than 350 college presidents across the nation have firmly opposed any legislation allowing gun possession on college campuses. In an environment confronted by random and cruel violence, it is vital that lawmakers and students alike recognize that we must not try to fight evil with evil, or violence with violence. Allowing guns within the bounds of our educational institutions opens up the door to increased violence and turmoil on college campuses, and does not address the root of our cyclical pattern of gun violence in America. As current college students in Georgia, we are uniting to bring peace and harmony to our campuses to combat evil and violence. Through countless Twitter campaigns, campus rallies, and changes in on-campus policies and law enforcement support and interaction, we are taking effective and necessary strides to bring back the peace and harmony that was a critical aspect of the founding of many of our institutions of higher education. It is also necessary as we travel along our path to graduation. Today, we are calling you all, state legislators, to join our strides and support our efforts to overcome evil and violence with peaceful nonviolence and harmony. We not only deserve a vote, but our vote is essential in the stand against gun violence and weapons within our homes of academic excellence and growth. The time for change has chosen us, and the only question that remains is how do you choose to respond? Many of our statistics in this reading from this letter are from the letter of support from the President of Oglethorpe and Agnes Scott, and also additionally supported by the Presidents Beverly Daniel Tatum of Spelman College and the former President Robert Franklin of Morehouse College. Thank you all today for allowing me the opportunity to share my beliefs and Spelman's beliefs and the AUC beliefs, and once again, I eagerly remind each of you that we deserve a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think you're going to see a vote here shortly.
Amen.
Yes,
it's good to be have that break, Chairman. I think we all have left refreshed. Stephen Green. Stephen A. Green, Morehouse College. Greetings, dear Chairman, representatives, and friends. This is a very crucial moment and critical moment in the history of the state of Georgia as we make this decision tonight, as you make this decision tonight, to equip vigilantes all across the state and make Georgia the most trigger-happy and unsafe state in the union. As a student in this state, I am morally appalled and extremely fearful that places of worship will turn into war zones, bars into battlefields, airports into atrocities of violence, and schools into cemeteries. the safety on the streets from Athens to Cordell, from Stone Mountain to Valdosta, will now be jeopardized with this bill that removes the requirement of fingerprinting upon license removal. If you pass this bill, there will be blood on your fingerprints that bleeds from college students who fear going to school in this state. The blood will be on your fingerprints from parishioners who come to worship to find spiritual power, but instead face a congregation of deadly lethal power. The blood will bleed on your fingerprints from travelers who go through the airports in the state to go on vacation, but who are now subject to someone who unknowingly had a gun in their briefcase and created a shooting in the airport. To address your private property requirement, you are inherently neglecting your responsibility to the public and to the citizens of Georgia who are on these private properties. I urge you tonight, as a law-abiding citizen, to stop this bill from moving forward tonight and use your fingers as an instrument of justice, peace, and equality. And since we wanted statistics, Mr. Representative, let me direct you to the Violence Policy Center, who states that 499 people were killed by concealed weapon permit holders from 2007 of May to 2010 of May. 14 law enforcement officers were killed, 485 private citizens, 23 mass killings were done by members by concealed weapon permit holders, and 35 murder-suicides. So there is no absence of crime by permit holders. I think that's something we should take into account. And moving forward, I urge you to stop this bill in this progression tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Good evening. My name is James Wesley Dennis III, and I am a proud alumnus of Morehouse College. And I also am the associate minister and youth minister at the West Hunter Street Baptist Church, the spiritual home of the Reverend Dr. Ralph David Abernathy, for 40 years. As an associate minister and future senior minister, I have the duty to lead a spiritual community and to worship. That duty is one of my great joys. And as any member of the clergy will tell you, one of the most essential parts of worship is the security of the people God has entrusted to me to lead. Friends, effective worship is when members of a community can come together in a secure and regulated environment and commune with each other and God. As their leader, it is my responsibility to know exactly who has firearms in the congregation at any given time. Mr. Chairman, the passing of this legislation makes that obligation, the security of my congregation, impossible, thus limiting the efficiency of my job as shepherd. It is not wise to allow lay members, those who are untrained law enforcement professionals, carry guns into a church. And although I trust that licensed gun holders abide by the law, it is unwise in abuse of my spiritual discernment to believe that the motives or intentions of licensed members of my congregation will always remain pure. It is spiritual and intellectually immature not to ask this body the question, why does a member of my church need a gun for worship? Why do I have to exclude members of worship who want to abide by this legislation, but will be excluded because of the church's denial to have weapons in worship? And I support a relevant interpretation of the Second Amendment. However, we all know that there are few shootings by average citizens who are defending themselves. Mr. Chairman, this body, I take seriously the words of Jesus when he states to be gentle as a dove, but wise as a serpent. And I have a church to lead and a community to protect. And this add of uncertainty about who might be carrying a weapon into the mix is an unnecessary and inappropriate result of this legislation. I believe in the rights, but we need to talk about the appropriateness of exercising rights. We have First Amendment rights to speak whatever is on our mind, but few of you will go into a funeral and speak ill of the person laying in the casket. We are all aware that when we come together in a social contract or in a social environment, that certain rights are taken with extreme caution and care to protect the well-being of that community. So, let me answer the distinguished gentleman's daughter, her question that she presented to this body. The business of the state of Georgia The business that the state of Georgia has in the church is its obligation to protect its citizens from senseless acts of violence. This bill is the antithesis of this obligation. And my spiritual community and the likes of spiritual communities that have this sentiment will make sure that this body knows that we do not support this piece of legislation. I pray not only for the intellectual clarity, but also for spiritual conviction as you continue this process. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question. Mr. Dalton.
Good evening. Everyone who buys an automobile will not drink and drive. That's correct. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank y'all for coming.
That's Marks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
And your
problem.
name?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ronnie Mosley. I'm a convener of the Intercollegiate Action Network, which is a coalition of students and universities across Georgia. I like to state that guns are not the accessory of students. It is not our laptop. It's not our book bag. It is not our textbooks. Out of all the tours that I've given, not one prospective student who asks if we allow guns on our campus. As we look at our Constitution, we are guaranteed inalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. This bill endangers our lives. It is an imprisonment by fear and shifts our focus from happiness to safety. The representative has stated folks have asked him for this bill. Students across Atlanta and Georgia, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Georgia State, Agnes Scott, Oglethorpe, Georgia Tech, Valdosta, and Georgia Southern University have said no. Let it be a known fact, this bill is not according to our wishes. Colin Garter, a survivor of Virginia Tech, has joined a national committee that is against this bill and others. In fact, all 17 survivors are against inviting more guns into an environment as a safe solution. How many travelers park their cars at the airport to go back to? What if they are rushing for a flight? Will post-secondary institutions be mandated to pass policy declaring their stance? This committee, you are all better than this. Prove it. Don't deem this mirage as a solution. Where is your student advisory committee? As I shared this with students, they saw this bill as a joke. Where are your solutions that we believe in? Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Good evening. My name is Roberto Gutierrez. Probably you guys see me around here I'm interning here with one organizations here on the Capitol. I'm here talking as a student of Georgia State University. I'm gonna be succinct, given that you probably heard many good testimonies already. I heard them myself as well. Something that when I saw this new version of the bill, which I wish we'll have more time to review it, just like we did HB 35 on this very same committee about a couple of weeks ago. This committee just entered in the system this Friday. It's on committee today, Monday. And this very late hour, I've seen you guys working very hard all day today. I would love that we all have more time to review it, given the fact that we have, as we can see, it's a bill that has raised so much interest, so much questions, so much controversy in our community here. Like I mentioned earlier, from Peru, from South America, something that we learned over there from the issues we got back on the day on the 80s is guns are not for protection. Guns are meant for killing. The only difference from one gun versus the other is what is the size of the being we're trying to kill and what kind of protection this being is using. from our guns. If I want to protect myself, and I'm going to Georgia State, this is a school that is here, and I probably hear every day about maybe somebody wandering around the school looking a little bit suspicious. Okay, if I want to protect myself, I'd rather use pepper spray, as I'm gonna make one of those zapping machines. Guns, I feel there is a major difference from protecting myself and killing somebody else. Something that we start to see every day on the news. My sister just got me to Fox News. It's fascinating, all the information that is out there that I wasn't available to see before. We just see in Atlanta, on our community, this past month, this past week, 2 shootings that came out from accidental shootings, that the people who were carrying the guns did not mean to shoot. One lady shot herself. This other kid, because I believe was on this middle school, right? He was taunting his friend, oops, I shoot somebody. And the bullet went all the way and hit another guy who was, God knows what, 300 yards away. I appreciate the fact that we're addressing the safety. It's a valid concern, and I appreciate it, and I thank you for that. But at the same token, I believe we need to review the approach we're using for this. We're having, on the old version on this bill, I'm thinking it's kind of similar on this one. We're asking for less fingerprints for people to renew their gun licenses. We're asking for facilities to people to use guns. It's something that we have seen on our community is we have a lot of guns, and the people who shouldn't have access to it ended up having to it, like this Adam Lanza guy who took her mom's guns. The shootings that happened on Virginia Tech some time ago. This person has a gun license, and he was able to buy all these major assault weapons to shoot each other. You already hear, I'm sure, from the people already here, from the police officers, that it's harder when you see a bunch of guns, because I'm in Georgia State. There's 30,000 students there. I cannot imagine somebody trying to remember, okay, how many people here has a license, how many who has not has a license here to carry weapons, conceal weapons on campus. Which is even worse, because I'm gonna know that somebody doesn't have a permit, or maybe have some sort of issues until he or she starts to shooting me. And then when I'm gonna know, okay, you know what, this good guy who has the gun ended up being not a good guy, because okay, you know what, he started shooting people. Because that's something that is a consistent story that we hear for every shooting on the country. He was a good guy, he was very intelligent, he just was a little antisocial. Well, I don't know what happened with him. He was such an awesome, sweet guy. We hear that every time we get a shooting on the U.S. So when we're hearing about that issue about, okay, we're giving guns to the good guys with license, you know what? Everybody's a good guy until they decide to start killing people. Once again, I appreciate the safety, I appreciate the effort of you guys to stay in this late after such a long day. Once again, I witnessed how hard you work to address all the issues of HB 35. During a consistent period of couple of weeks at least, you guys, and it was a small bill, a bill that's already included here. This is a bill talking about having guns on bars, having guns on churches, having guns on colleges, universities, technical schools, having guns on dorms, having guns on middle schools, having guns on, what's the other one? High schools, airports. We are covering so much ground on this bill. I believe the bill deserves, and we all deserve have a clear mind, well-rested mentality to address all that is written here. Not something that it was written, God knows. I mean, this version of the bill came out very fast. I really encourage, please, I understand that you care about our safety, and I appreciate that, but this is a decision that we cannot do in a hurry. We cannot do tired. We cannot do it this late at night. Please, review what you're trying to do with this. Please review the cons and the questions that I'm thinking half of the people here already addressed to you all. This is not the time to do this. This is too fast. Thank you very much.
Any questions? And thank y'all. We appreciate it. All right. Let's see. Mr. Rory Danner?
Good evening. My name is Rory Danner. I'm a resident in Smyrna. I'm a single parent with 2 kids, college graduate from Washington State, and plan to attend Kennesaw State University, which is close to where I work. You can probably tell by my button I support the Second Amendment, the Georgia Carry button, but I'm here representing myself. I just consider it fortunate that the organization Georgia Carry has done so much work on my behalf before I even joined. So the bill addresses a few things. And so the first one, the government buildings. I come from Washington State, which has a different set of laws. And I have to say I was surprised when I started researching things that my Second Amendment rights were stripped in government buildings. That seemed a little backwards to me. The campus carry has received a lot of attention. I'll save that for last. The fingerprinting does not remove fingerprinting, as you all know, from obtaining a Georgia weapons license. It simply removes it from obtaining renewals. I've had my fingerprint taken several times for a security clearance for the military, when I coached high school wrestling, when I've obtained Georgia weapons licenses, and to this day I put my fingerprint on checks when I go to the bank, and I'm not really sure why. But my fingerprint has not changed. It remains the same. I'm not quite sure about the bank one. That's another story. I support the military service options that have been presented in the bill. As a member of the military, or former member of the military, honorably discharged, I understand the level of weapons training that you get in the military is significant. These are not children that are coming back from the military. I support the airport weapon clarification, clarifying that the public areas of the airport are free and clear. It makes things far easier for me when my relatives come from out of town and I'm visiting a friend's farm in South Georgia, that I don't have to worry about leaving my guns at home to go hunting, going down to the airport to pick them up, going back up to Cobb County to go retrieve our hunting supplies, and then going back down to South Georgia. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There's been some question about the criminal intent in the airport, and I think it will be fairly easy to note that we're talking about weapons. So to the best of my knowledge, weapons in this section includes knives, something that's easily forgotten and left in a briefcase. I think it's pretty simple to understand who's simply forgotten and left a gun or a knife in a bag that goes through an x-ray machine that's obviously going to be detected, versus the person that's disassembled it, tried to smuggle it in through toothpaste containers and everything else. I don't think that the security at the airport is going to have difficulty identifying one versus the other. I support the elimination of bars. There's been a great deal of discussion that someone shouldn't be able to carry a weapon into a bar. I live in Smyrna. There are 4 restaurants very close to my house within walking distance. I've gone into each of those and asked the manager if they are considered a bar and if they allow weapons carry in their facilities. All 4 of them were not sure if they were considered a bar under the existing laws. The existing laws to me are somewhat unclear, meaning that food is served as something other than incidental to the serving of alcohol. So whether I'm at a pizza place that happens to have alcohol, or a place that's labeled a tavern but has a better menu than most restaurants I normally eat at, or a sushi bar that just has the name bar in the name and serves alcohol, but clearly that's not the focus of their business. I think if the owners of these establishments can identify themselves within the written law as it is, and there's really no limit on alcohol that you can consume in nearly any place that serves it. So whether it's a bar or not, I believe the existing alcohol laws, which are already in place, that govern what you can do with a firearm if you've consumed alcohol, are sufficient, regardless of location, whether it's in your home, at a state park, in a restaurant that serves alcohol, or a bar. I support the security officer in schools. I believe that schools are one of the things that I commonly think of as designated victim zones. It's scary to me that my children are in grade school, and it's known throughout the county that nobody there will be armed to defend the children. I consider this very similar to the situation with air marshals on planes. If it were to pass as is, I think the effect would be similar. If you approach a school You don't know if anybody is armed. You don't know if the school even approves of armed security guards. But suddenly, it is no longer a designated victim zone. Campus carry. My children, if they continue at the rate they are, will have long since graduated before they're able to get a Georgia weapons license. I consider that a great feat for them. They're good students. I plan to return to Kennesaw State University. Obviously, I'm old enough to carry a Georgia weapons license and currently possess one. I'm concerned that campuses that have already determined their campus requires armed security in the form of police have suddenly determined that it's safe enough that they don't really need armed people on campus. Oh wait, that's the citizens, just not us. I also find it difficult to understand how in the same breath individuals can take the microphone and claim to respect the Second Amendment while at the same time trying to strip it randomly from geographic locations around Georgia, whether that's the school, the church, or a campus. I'm concerned a little about the officers earlier that mentioned their what seemed to me a guns blazing policy, that if there's a shooter on campus, that they would go in guns blazing and not be able to recognize a good guy versus a bad guy. This doesn't seem to be the case anywhere else in Georgia. I haven't heard in the law, in the news, that there have been cases of citizens exercising their Second Amendment rights, defending themselves, their family, or those around them, where the police have shown up and shot the good guys and not the bad. Quite often it seems that that event is long over before the police arrive. They say that they're minutes away. I have yet to go to the range and see a bullet take minutes to reach the target. The identification of friend or foe seems to be handled with the public in other places other than campus. I know that when I was taught about self-defense in my home, I'm to call 911, have them on the phone so that I can identify my location so that when the police do arrive, I know that I can disarm and identify myself to a law enforcement officer when they approach. Hopefully, the event will be over before they arrive if I'm in that situation. We heard the testimony of a counselor at a college. It's my understanding that there are counselors all over the state. I've taken my son to a counselor. None of the news reports that I have seen in the state of Georgia indicate that counselors have a higher risk of death or have even had any incidents in the top 14 years that I've been here. I understand the concern for safety. I understand that some people are afraid of guns. I suggest they don't get a Georgia weapons license. There was recently a situation in Lawrenceville with a young lady that defended herself against a home intruder. She fired 6 rounds, hitting with 5, and the intruder escaped, got in his car, and drove away. We've heard testimony earlier today that some people here would rather defend themselves with pepper spray. I suggest that if that lady had only had pepper spray, the situation would have been much worse. I hope that private schools make a good choice for the safety of their students. As I understand this bill, it would not affect their ability to regulate the carry of weapons or guns on their campus, similarly to the rest of the state of Georgia, which in my opinion seems to be working well. Thank you.
Yeah, one question, please, Ms. Waits.
The woman that you're referencing, wasn't she in her personal home?
She was in her home.
Okay. And the second question I have.
And I was illustrating the difference between pepper spray and a gun in the case of self-defense.
Absolutely. The second question I had is, are you familiar with the incident that occurred at Fort Hood, Texas, where the military member fired on his own service members and colleagues?
I'm familiar with it roughly, that he fired on his own military members. There were 2 or 3 soldiers that were performing physical training that were not armed, that happened to be in the area, approached the shooter from behind, and were able to disable him before he was able to do more harm. That's the limit of my understanding.
As well as the Fulton County shooting that occurred several years ago? the Brian Nichols case, where he took an actual weapon from an officer who actually had the training and shot a judge and several other individuals in the Fulton County Courthouse?
I'm not as familiar with that case.
These are just examples where we had weapons that were legally obtained, meaning the officer had the right to have a weapon there on site in a government building, as well as a gentleman who was in Fort Hood, Texas, someone that we should have trusted, who had the training necessary, but they were turned against us and used for violent purposes. And my concern I'm simply raising is with respect to students on a college campus. That terrifies me, the thought that this may open up Pandora's box. That's my only concern. I like the other language.
Well, that box exists throughout the rest of the state of Georgia. And, you know, it's not often that we hear in the news that someone has their weapon taken away from them and used for some other harm. It's my belief that the Second Amendment allows me to protect myself, much like I'm allowed free speech, even if I say something stupid. I'm allowed to practice religion, even if the previous pastor up here and I don't agree. So to say the fear that there might be one case where it's used incorrectly, I don't think is a valid argument for removing a constitutional right, in my opinion.
Thank you, sir. All right. Representative Gregory.
All right, wake up. I'm the last one. I think I'm the last one, right? I don't know.
Well, no, you're not, but we're certainly going to.
I'm sorry. I also
but as a member of the House, I know you understand the necessity of brevity.
Well, I do apologize. My testimony.
This committee can be said. We believe in the First Amendment.
My testimony actually got a little bit longer as I sat there, so maybe you should send me first next time. I just wanted to say, before I start what I had originally written, 21-year-old adults attending a college or university are entitled to the same natural rights as every other individual. It's unethical and immoral to deprive any individual of his or her natural rights without due process, and it saddens and frustrates me to witness small groups of individuals, many, the empowered few, telling us that the unempowered masses cannot be trusted to exercise their God-given rights. Where else have we seen this in our history? Our country is a republic. We supposedly have rule of law, not tyranny of the majority. In other words, nobody gets a vote to take away the rights of other individuals. Okay, moving on. Yes. Why don't you wait till... Yeah, go ahead and pass that out. That's good. That's some supporting documentation. Chairman Powell, members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing today. In the short time since HB 512 was dropped last Friday, it sparked quite a bit of discussion within the community of gun rights advocates. This bill makes clear and substantial progress in many areas of concern for gun owners across the state. I'm personally pleased that it includes church carry and campus carry provisions similar to two of the pro-liberty gun bills I introduced earlier this session. As Chairman Powell, Representative Jaspers, and others assured me it would. I've received quite a bit of correspondence regarding this bill over the weekend. I imagine the bill's author and members of the committee have as well. You are likely aware of some of the concerns that have been raised by gun owners and advocates over a couple of sections in HB 512 in its current form. I'd like to speak to those briefly and offer suggestions for amended language that could alleviate some of these concerns for consideration by the committee. First of these is related to college campuses. HB 512 takes a clear step in the right direction on the issue of campus carry. Unfortunately, it still prohibits students of legal age who have a valid Georgia weapons license from possessing a firearm in their home simply because they reside on campus. While the current language of HB 512 is a marketable improvement in terms of scale of infringement over existing law, the state should not be in the business of sustaining gun-free zones or infringing on the people's rights at all. The natural right to self-defense is unalienable. Gun owners across the state would like to see this section amended to remove the student housing and other remaining college campus restrictions. I offer substitute language for your consideration. The other issue I've heard about more than any other is that of a mandatory, quote, mental health waiver. In my research and discussions with representatives from both of the state's gun rights groups on Sunday, I have found this to be a mixed bag. Under current law, the requirement to sign a mental health waiver when applying for a Georgia weapons license is at the discretion of the probate judge. Under the initial version of HB 512, it becomes mandatory for all applicants. I'm pleased to see that HB 512 narrows the mental health check to only involve involuntary hospitalizations. Then there's the issue of the $3 fee associated with this mental health check. I'm also aware elsewhere in code, HB 512 would significantly cut the cost of license renewals. On this issue, I would simply like to suggest that the language in HB 512 as it applies to the associated waiver and fee is superfluous. Please refer to the handout that I provided for you and follow along. I'll try to go through quickly and summarize in the end. Sorry, I got to switch over. Okay. Stated purpose of lines 279 and 303 of HB 512 are to narrow down the scope of Georgia's mental health check code to match that of the Federal Brady Act. Federal Brady Act says, in part, it shall be unlawful for any person to sell or otherwise dispose of any firearm or ammunition to any person knowing or having reasonable cause to believe that such person has been adjudicated as a mental defective or has been committed to any mental institution. Although the Brady Act deals with restrictions on who can obtain a weapon, Georgia Code denies a carry license to any person that would be unable to obtain a weapon under the federal statute. Furthermore, under Georgia Code, a probate judge is prohibited from issuing a weapons carry license to any person who has been an inpatient to a mental hospital or alcohol or drug treatment center within 5 years of the application. Under the law, the judge has the discretion to require the applicant to sign a waiver such that the judge may acquire mental health records from inpatient hospitals. The judge may use this opinion of the hospital's administrator of the applicant's mental health, no sworn affidavit required, to deny the application for a weapons license. A $3 fee is imposed on the applicant when the judge decides to pursue this particular path of tyranny. Current Georgia law is broader than the Brady Act as it denies licenses to any person receiving treatment and not simply to that have been involuntarily committed. When a person is involuntarily committed in Georgia under OCGA 37381, that person automatically receives a hearing before the judge, a public defendant if needed, and notice of their rights, all within a total of 17 days of being committed. In those cases where a person is involuntarily committed, adjudicated as mentally defective, or is found not guilty by way of insanity, that person's involuntary commitment is forwarded to the FBI NICS database by the GBI under OCGA 33334 and 1611-172, and under Georgia Code, all applicants for Georgia weapons carry licenses are investigated using the GBI and FBI NICS databases. In summary, the judge already knows whether the applicant has been involuntarily committed, adjudicated mentally defective, or is pled not guilty by way of insanity simply by performing the background check required under OCGA 1611-129D1. All of the relevant information is already contained in the GBI and FBI NICS databases. HB 512 inserts the words involuntarily on line 279. This narrows the scope of OCGA 1611-129B2J to that of the Brady Act. However, the existing code regarding a waiver fee and the opinion of a mental health facility superintendent are only relevant under the existing code's broader inclusion of any inpatient hospitalization. I believe a better way to narrow the scope of subparagraph B2J would be to insert the word involuntary in the first sentence and then to strike all subsequent sentences in paragraph B2J. This would achieve the same effect without the $3 fee, with less code, and would alleviate any concerns about starting down the dangerous slippery slope of having government require applicants prove their mental competency prior to being able to exercise their God-given right of self-defense. Anyone who has been involuntarily committed is already in the NICS database. Why have the inclusion of the mental health mandate when it accomplishes nothing over current law? A mental health mandate is exactly what New York City's Mayor Bloomberg has been asking for in his request to confiscate guns. It has been mentioned that some states may not require mandatory reporting. However, the vast majority of individuals applying for concealed carry permits already own guns. Under the Gun Control Act of 1968, it is a federal crime to own a gun if you have been committed. The other issue that I've heard about, oops, I'm sorry. Where's page 5? Sorry, this is the last page. I'll find it. Here we go. These individuals are already violating federal law. Don't you think someone who's already violating federal law would lie on their mandated affidavit? In the end, my proposal preserves the state's ability to assess whether an individual has been involuntarily hospitalized while striking the unnecessary language concerning mandatory waivers and fees. With that said, I thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Mr. Edwards, representing the ACCG. Brevity. Would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards, representing the Association County Commissioners of Georgia. Mr. Chairman, I assure you that Georgia counties do appreciate the beauty of brevity, and I intend to present just that this evening. I wanted to, commenting on several of the remarks heard before from both proponents and opponents of this bill, ACCG has no position on the gun laws in Georgia, whether they should or should not be allowed in the places, whether these exemptions should be lifted. We have members, quite frankly, on both sides. Depending on which part of the state you go, which community you go in, you're going to have county commissioners both in favor vehemently and against the proposals in this bill. However, there was one particular provision that ACCG has concerns with in its current form, and it's not whether or not guns should be allowed in government buildings, but whether or not the state should be making that decision on behalf of these local governments, the aforementioned ones, which differ from north, south, east, west to rural or urban. I would subject to you that that decision best be made by county commissioners at the local level with the input from their respective citizenry on both sides of the issues. Again, ACCG not taking a position on whether or not that is allowed. Why are our governments different? I think, as you all know up here, oftentimes they're quite heated decisions are made at the local government level. Everything, and these are all bills that you've dealt with either currently or in the past, from animal control to local zoning to cell tower sightings, which may or may not be impacted, that you are considering in the very near future, to chickens and goats and residential backyards. These are tough decisions made at the local level by county commissioners elected by the public to do so, held accountable to the public to do so, and I believe that local government, home rule, and local control, should prevail in this community. To those that will ask, does that mean, Mr. Edwards, that we would have possibly 159 different laws on the state of Georgia governing whether or not guns should be allowed in local government buildings? That's a fair question. Should we have 159 different laws on zoning, on chickens and goats in backyards? Should it be the same in rural Georgia as it is in the city of Atlanta, et cetera, et cetera? I would kindly submit to you, Mr. Chairman, in my act of brevity here before you, that this decision be left to local county commissioners and communities. I thank you for your time and consideration.
And we certainly appreciate that. All right. We're getting down to this. We have... I see 1, 2, 3 from the same organization, Georgia Carey. Would all three gentlemen like to come up?
We've got to wait for the aged to make his way up here. Chairman Powell, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we appreciate your time and consideration for this bill tonight. We're at least as interested as you are in brevity as well. I'd also just like to show of hands for Georgia Carey members that are here tonight. I'd like for the committee to recognize that there are quite a few in our group, including in your own committee, who are here in support of the bill. We are fully in support of this bill, and we're particularly fully in support of some of the particular changes to line 105 that is a big improvement to the government buildings section. We think that adds clarity and it helps our members and the ladies and gentlemen of the committee. We appreciate your consideration of that. we've heard a lot of commentary tonight, and I would simply like to say that our members not only are law-abiding citizens, but they are citizens who take very seriously their burdens to one another and to their community and to their families. My wife is a Georgia mother, and she is at home right now with her gun, as likely are the mothers of thousands of the rest of our members. I'd also like to point out that statistics have been asked for, and we have published those on our website. We invite you to look at those. But one continually consistent thread occurs throughout these gun law debates, and that is when the predictions of apocalypse and the predictions of blood running in the streets are put forward, it doesn't happen. A few years ago, we heard from the regents and others that there would be blood running through the college campuses and people would be running to get their guns and shoot one another when they got a bad grade in class. It hasn't happened. Okay, we have not had those instances in bars. We haven't had them in restaurants. In fact, with references to mass shootings, you cannot point to a single mass shooting that has occurred at the hands of a license holder in Georgia. You just can't, because it doesn't exist. Our members are not the types of folks who go and commit these crimes. And frankly, for those who would commit the worst of crimes, murder, including murder of small children, they're just not affected by the no gun zone at the school. They're just not. And so it is those law-abiding folks who are concerned with what you say and do here tonight. Those people who would commit murder are simply not concerned with what you say and do here tonight. Otherwise, I want to honor the request for brevity and suggest that we're available for questions. Our volunteer attorneys and our members live and breathe these laws because we care every day. We have a vast experience with how they have worked and how they have not worked in different communities and different situations. So I would just offer us as a resource if you have questions about how portions of this bill might work.
Very good. Any questions?
I do.
Mr. Hightower, so good to have you back.
Quick question, maybe for the attorney there. I've gotten emails from two different prominent groups, mainly Georgia Carry and Georgia Gun Owners. And Georgia Carry has taken the stance that, and I'm just so you know, I'm focusing on the mandates section that goes towards the mental health issue stuff. I've read through it, and I'm an attorney outside of this. That doesn't mean I know everything. By far, it probably means I know far less. But I've read through the current, what we have in front of us today, and it looks as though it just clarifies some of these things and makes it clear and easier to understand what's going on. But yet I have other groups that are saying that we're trying to backdoor folks and take their guns and raise fees. And am I missing something? Because I don't see that. I don't see that. I don't see that's what we're trying to do. I don't see that's our goal. I mean, you don't get much more pro-Second Amendment than me. And so if I'm missing something, please tell me where I'm missing it.
Mr. Representative, the mental health section is not really a mental health. I keep hearing people say a mental health check. This is an inquiry into, under House Bill 512, an inquiry into involuntary hospitalizations. That's what it is. Under federal law, it is a felony for a person who's been involuntarily hospitalized to possess a firearm, and because of that, Georgia law does not permit those people who are federally disqualified for any reason, including involuntary hospitalizations, to possess a firearm. In Georgia, it's true that those involuntary hospitalizations are reported to the NICS system, but it's not true of every state, and certainly we have people moving here from other states as well. But what this section does is narrow the scope of the check that's being performed. There was a concern up here earlier about due process and discretion in the probate judge, and it was pointed out that that is existing law, and under existing law, a probate judge may deny a license to a person who has voluntarily checked themselves in somewhere to get some help with addiction, or a soldier returning from Afghanistan who thinks he might be suffering symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that. Somebody who voluntarily seeks help could be disarmed under current Georgia law and is therefore possibly dissuaded from seeking that help. House Bill 512 would remove that sort of incentive to not seek help. It would narrow the scope of the search. It would lower the fees because it's going to take out the background check fee at renewal time, which is $45 starting March 1st. The GBI just raised its fingerprinting price, and $52 if you're using the GAP system. So this $3 fee worry here, we're talking about 1/15 of what House Bill 512 will do in reducing. But the most important provision here is, and we know this because our members have been held up sometimes for many months. And keep in mind that while this says the judge shall require, many of the probate judges are already doing this. I suspect most will be doing this very soon, regardless of what you do with House Bill 512 because of concerns over mental health. And some of the counties are taking months and months to issue the firearms license and are saying, well, we're waiting on this check to come back. Well, House Bill 512 says that there's a presumption that the statement you make on that application is correct, that you have not been involuntarily hospitalized, and it gives a time limit for the first time ever in Georgia law on this particular hospitalization inquiry, which is at line 328 in the version that's there, and it says 30 days. So it'll make sure that check falls within the same timeline as the criminal background check that's being done. And if I may just point out that the due process consideration is real under current Georgia law, but House Bill 512 is correcting that by making it for involuntary hospitalizations only. And involuntary hospitalizations have due process. If I could just take 5 seconds, and I promise I'll be done. I'll give an example of one set of processes. There are a bunch of them in Title 37 of the Code, but just one of them here is a recommendation from the Chief Medical Officer of the evaluating facility, supported by the opinions of 2 physicians or a physician and a psychologist who've personally examined this person, who then go to the court and say this person's in immediate danger, he needs to be involuntarily committed against his will. It also requires notice of a hearing, where it'll be held, the time and date, a notice that the patient has a right to counsel, the provision of counsel if he can't afford one, a right to be examined by a physician or psychologist of his own choosing, and a right, in the words of the statute, the court shall hold a full and fair hearing unless the hearing is waived in writing by the patient. So House Bill 512, by narrowing the check to the involuntary hospitalization only, will remove that due process concern and make sure that these people are getting due process.
I greatly appreciate that explanation. So to make it clear for me and for everyone else, because I am pro-Second Amendment, I am not, by this bill, we are not imposing any hidden fees or new fees. We're actually reducing the fee of renewals.
Well, you are certainly reducing the fee by $45 to $52. The $3 fee that was being mentioned is in current law. You will note that
right.
It is in line 319. It is not an underlined, meaning it hasn't been added to the code. That's the current fee under Georgia law. Not every probate judge necessarily charges that fee. Many do. The most populous counties do. And I imagine within just a few years, all of them will be doing so.
So, 1, we're not increasing the fee. 2, we're expediting the process to get your license, correct?
That's correct.
And then 3rd, we're narrowing the scope to involuntary, where before it was just inpatient.
That's correct, yes.
So, expediting, no additional fee, and narrowing the scope.
And actually, overall lowering the fee if you ever intend to renew your license. Lowering the fee by 15 times that $3 fee.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, everything they just explained is exactly as I understand it, and what was in here. My only point with my testimony is that if we can determine that somebody has been involuntarily committed based on existing law without having this whole section, then that would alleviate the whole question. Also, we don't know when we put language like that in law what future legislators might do.
And I understand I wasn't, Representative, I wasn't trying to attack what you present at all. I was just wanting to make sure I had clarity from what we have here, because I've gotten well over 1,500 emails from 2 different groups, and in all honesty, I am asking these questions through genuine concern. I do not want to impose any or impede anyone's Second Amendment right. I'm not going to do it, and so I was truly asking their opinion. I mean, as an attorney who's looked over this for Georgia Carry, I was wanting to see if any of these legitimate concerns that were brought to me through 800 more emails had validity to them, and that's where the questions were coming from. If we were imposing hidden fees, if we were prolonging the process, if we were broadening the scope, then it's not something that I would have been able to get behind. But if right now we're narrowing the scope, reducing the fee, and expediting the process, sounds like a good pro-Second Amendment bill.
Representative Hightower, it's actually addressing something that's affecting real people and has affected real people in counties right here that you can see outside of your window. We've had members who've had to wait for months, and the excuse was because of this check in particular. In fairness to Representative Gregory's point, yes, in Georgia, for people who were involuntarily hospitalized in Georgia, it is somewhat superfluous because those are reported to the NICS system, and the NICS check is part of applying for the license. But not all states do that, and we have a lot of people who move here from out of state, and this would permit the probate judge to check for involuntary hospitalizations for that person who has disclosed something like that on the form, which, by the way, it's a crime to lie on that form as well.
I greatly appreciate you being so thorough with your answer. I know the chairman wants us to brevity, but a lot of times some of these things we need you to open it up a little bit and explain it to us, so thank you.
Thank you. The chairman certainly believes in his Second Amendment rights, and I'm beginning to think I believe too much in the First Amendment rights. Now, do we have any other question of these gentlemen? If y'all might just stay over there for just a few minutes, because y'all might want to chime in and help define some of the possible amendments. Any other questions from the committee? All right. I just can't believe it. We have now ended the, everybody has spoke that has signed up. All right. What's the will of the committee? Mr. Lunson. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Waits.
Move we do pass.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Well, we need a motion first. Mr. Lunson. We have a motion to do pass. We have a second. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a friendly amendment due to the fact that the students are not subject to the same rigorous requirements that school safety officers would be subject to, that we strike all language with respect to campus carry.
You can certainly make that in the form of a motion. Council, would you define that area for us?
Paragraph 19. And I would make sure that if there were any conforming provisions that needed to be changed, I'd be glad to do that. But I think that's the heart of the exception to carrying on universities and any post-secondary education.
All right. Could you repeat those lines again?
It would be striking lines 217 through 221.
All right. Any questions? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed? No. Nay. Would you like a show of hands?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. Motion fails. Now, do we have any other motions from the committee members? If not, I would like to, the chair would like, has some amendments to make. You'll go to line 105. This is the language that deals with carrying in government buildings. You have the amendment in front of you. For the benefit of the audience, counsel, would you like to read that amendment?
Yes, and I would point out that this is not a substantive change. This was merely recommended for purposes of clarity. subsection, I'm sorry, yes. Subsection E actually sets out two separate offenses, and so the amendment would actually clarify that. Also, there was some concern that security personnel was too vague a term, and therefore we've added security personnel that restricts and screens ingress in order to better identify that personnel. But there is no substantive change. The wording is, a license holder shall be authorized to carry a weapon in a government building or courthouse where ingress into such building or courthouse is not restricted or screened by security personnel during the hours the government building or courthouse is open for business. A person who is not a license holder and who attempts to enter a government building or courthouse with a weapon shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. A person who enters or attempts to enter a government building or courthouse where ingress is restricted or screened by security personnel shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, provided, however, that a person who exits such building or courthouse or leaves such location upon his or her observation that such building or courthouse has security personnel restricting or screening ingress into such building or courthouse shall not be guilty of violating this subsection.
Does everyone understand? We're replacing line 105 to 110 with this language, this clarifying language. Do I have a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Do we have any discussion? Any questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the ayes have it. One opposition. Second change. You would go to line 172.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there was some discussion of amendment on 119.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one in a second. Yes. Let's go ahead and do this other one. On line 172. In an attempt for clarification of language into the school language, recommend to strike after the word use as part of any activity being conducted. Line 172. Strike after the word use as part of any activity being conducted. And that connects those into a more streamlined interpretation.
No. No.
All right. Any questions? Is there a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second. Any questions from the committee? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Back to line, page 4, line 119. This change will be proposed on line 119. Put a period after school, strike, or a public or private technical school, vocational school, college, university, or other institution of post-secondary education. The purpose of striking that language is there was a definition between K-12 and the university system. This needs to be out of the K-12 section, and we'll clarify that language. Any questions? Any questions from the committee? Is there a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. On page 9, line 308. After the word center, add to this, or adjudicated by a court to be in need of involuntary outpatient treatment under OCGA. Yes, Counsel.
I thought we had modified that somewhat to read, or adjudicated by a court to be in need of involuntary outpatient mental health treatment. That would be the end.
Mental health treatment. I stand corrected.
And that would appear not only after center on line 308, but also after center on line 310. Line 310. To cover involuntary outpatient. Yes, exact same language.
Could you read it again, Counsel?
Or adjudicated by a court to be in need of involuntary outpatient mental health treatment.
After the word center on 308 and after the word center on 310.
And simply to clarify that throughout the section, there needs to be some reference to these treatment centers as opposed to just the hospitals. On line 312, after the word hospitalized would be or treated. On line 315, after involuntarily hospitalized as an inpatient would be inserted or involuntarily treated as an outpatient. And on line 324, after alcohol or drug, we would insert or other treatment center. Again, there's no substantive change from those originally proposed amendments. That's just to create consistency and clarity for that change.
Any other questions? We have questions of the committee on that. Do y'all understand what this language does? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? We have a second. Any questions? Any questions from the committee? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's all the amendments that I have. Any other amendments from the committee? No questions, no comments? We have a motion. We have a second. Amendments have been perfected. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Two negative. Let the record, three in opposition. Let the record reflect. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all, each and every one, for this exercise in the process. I want to thank all of y'all who have spent time for the last 10 days writing and sending emails. I would certainly like to remind you that a lot of times people don't, they think that this is an event, but it's a process. It's part of the form of government that has been everlasting for some 240 years. This committee stands adjourned.